All right. What's up, everybody? How you doing out there? Welcome back to the show. This is last week's fights. My name is Thinker St. James, and tonight we are going to be going over some year-end best of the year list, checking out what the community and other outlets have said about 2024 in MMA, seeing if we agree with their picks, having a little bit of a conversation about that. And of course, to do that with me, as always, my co-host, the Ohio player, the co-host of the year every year, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Chase Parton. How you doing, brother?
Always a blessing. I can't wait for this one because honestly, there was some rumblings if we were going to do some 140 replay commentary, but we are not. And I'm excited to do this one that we got going here. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Same. I mean, the 140s, it was very nice. What Chase is referring to, if you're not aware, is that the UFC blessed us with another replay watch along. Where there was no event last week, of course, so the UFC threw on UFC 140 as a full-on replay for the people, just live on their YouTube channel. We both did watch-alongs of that, and it was definitely fun for sure. But we wanted it's the end of the year. This is really, I mean, we'll have a show next week that'll be talking about the first event of the year for next year. But this is, essentially our year-end wrap-up show. So we don't want to get bogged down with some stuff from years past. Plus, who wants to talk about John Jones choking the hell out of Lyoto Machida? Not me. Definitely not I. So, we got some bigger fish to fry than talking about the arguable best fighter of all time here on last week's fights. Let's talk about 2024 in retrospect. I think that is more appropriate.
yeah, no doubt. I'm ready to jump right into it. Do you want to start at the bottom of this list where you're at on the page, or did you want to do? Okay, yeah, we can do that. That's fine.
Yeah, I figured that makes sense. So just to set this up a little bit here, so we're going to start off with MMA Orbit, which is an outlet that we follow pretty closely on Twitter. They're one of the better breaking news outlets, and they did a number of polls on Twitter as to their of the year by category, essentially. So we've got all of them here. We'll go through these in this order, but I figure that starting off at the bottom, because I believe that it does work its way all the way up to male fighter of the year. So it kind of is laid out in order as is. So yeah, let's get into it. And shout out to Checkmate, by the way.
Yeah, and also Checkmate, bless you, appreciate you, my guy. I would like to say that let's add an honorable mention of our own.
Sure.
Maybe it's not to the caliber of these, but something on the back of your mind that maybe stuck with you, I think is good to add.
Absolutely. Yeah, most definitely. And a lot of them might come from these lists as well.
True.
So, I'll run down the, especially for the people who are not viewing live, the audio listeners, I will run down what the category is and then all of the nominees in here, and then tell you who the winner is as far as what they were picked by MMA Orbit's audience, and we'll talk through it a little bit. So starting it off here, this is the comeback of the year. And I'm assuming for this one, they're talking about in fight, because a little bit later on, if we go through some of these other lists, they have comeback defined a little bit differently. Like some of them had comeback as in like a person who had stepped away from the sport and then come back to it, which is a little bit strange to have that in the same category as comeback in fights. We'll get to that when we get to it. But for this is comeback within a fight. So the nominees are Jack Della Maddalena versus Gilbert Burns, Renato Moicano versus Jalen Turner, Neil Magny versus Mike Malott, Yuri Prohashka versus Alexander Rakic, and the winner was Renato Moicano versus Jalen Turner based on this poll. What do you think about that, Chase?
Um, it was definitely an entertaining one just because it was a really stupid moment from Jalen Turner. For this to win, though, I don't know if this is necessarily like a brutal comeback. Like, I don't, again, it's kind of a weird definition that they maybe have because I think Jack and Gilbert Burns, I think that was one hell of a comeback. You know, a lot of people said Gilbert was up in that fight. Most likely was. And then up until Jack was able to roll out of that submission or, you know, that grappling position on the cage and get up and land that killer knee. I mean, and not only to do that, but to have the injuries that he, you know, succumbed in the fight. I don't know. That's a really good one. So that maybe is the one that I would defend first. So
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. This does kind of seem a little strange to me to be the winner if for exactly the reasons that you laid out. It certainly was possibly the lowest IQ, fight IQ moment of the year for sure on Turner's part. But as far as it being like the overall comeback, I mean, I would certainly put the other two runners up, which would have been Jack Della Maddalena versus Burns and Yuri Prohashka versus Rakic. I would put both of them as better comebacks if you're looking at it in those terms. I mean, Rakic Prohashka is probably maybe a little bit lesser only because I think that was a slightly more even fight going into it. It wasn't like it was so one-sided. I think that Rakic was definitely up, but it was a good back and forth until it like really started to turn Yuri's way when he was getting his rhythm there. But yeah, Jack Della Maddalena, I think that I would agree. I think that it was absolutely a legitimate comeback in that fight. So to me, it was pretty close. I mean, we're talking 26% versus 31% for the winner runner up, and then Prohashka was a very close second as a 29.9 versus 31%. So pretty even competition there, but not a lot of love for Neil Magny over Mike Malott, and that was yet or I hesitate to say that was a low fight IQ moment, but it was certainly the heaviest of the fraud checks. It's kind of, we go through so much in the course of a year that like it's hard to remember where things lie. That was early in the year, but man, there really was nothing like seeing Mike Malott just completely implode after being up so far in those two rounds. So certainly implosion of the year, I would give to that one. But other than that, yeah, I think based on what we're talking through, the Jack Della Maddalena makes the most sense.
I want to add something that I think is crucial and might ruin, you know, the game here for us. But I think a lot of the votes, the majority of the winners, they're probably going to be on the bigger cards that most of the people saw. So UFC 300, everybody saw Moicano and Turner. More people are going to click, oh yeah, that was definitely it because they didn't see Magny and Malott. They weren't fucking watching Canada, you know.
Yeah, no, you make a very good point on that one as well. Yeah, that these are going off of strictly polls, so there's always going to be a little bit of a variation for that as well. And then also, people's have different reasons for different things on top of that even. But looking at the chat, I did want to highlight first and foremost, Checkmate saying that Marab's hairline as comeback of the year. I think that's a strong showing for sure. And actually, I think it's sad that he's retired, but Damon Jackson could also be put in that category as well.
True, so. Joe Pfeiffer. One last one for you guys.
Fair, absolutely.
Right. So,
also, as well, just wanted to highlight too, Anakin. Shout out to him saying that Charles Johnson in there versus Van. That was another really good one too.
I hate that he brought this one up when he said the KO part. Whatever. It kind of hurt, but my my runner up here, I want to say Ribovics and Zellhuber. I know it was maybe not a decision that I agree with, but he did win, and Zell Huber looked really good in my opinion up until that kind of flurry was going on. So
Yeah, but I mean, could you really call it a comeback if it was pretty well? You know what I mean? Like there
I
was
get you. I
a good
get you.
amount of
Yeah.
back and forth in that one, but
Same, I mean, same thing with Rakic and Prohashka,
you're right.
it's so it ended and it didn't end in like a finish, which most of these, all of them are ending in finishes. So maybe that was a bad pick on my part, but Josh Van, yep, shout out the boy. Sorry, but yeah, you might end up on the runner-up list here, kid.
Yeah, and
So
also actually, if you want to talk about another one that is an unsung fight coming in again from Anakin in the chat on this one, it would definitely be Fernandez versus Wang Tong. Holy
oh
guacamole!
shit. Yeah,
That
that
was
was
a
a
comeback.
damn good one. I'm really trying to think of some other solid ones off the top of my head. Damn, that was a really good one. Could we well, you were talking about how they're adding, or their comeback is could maybe be coming off retirement or whatever, stuff like that, or maybe they're coming back off a really bad loss and having something like that. So you could maybe make some reaches here and throw some other fights in there, but these are all generally from the fan voted going to be knockouts from guys that were down in the fight. So
For sure. Yes, absolutely. And I just realized that I left my water in the kitchen. If you want to set this fight
oh
or this
yeah.
category up for us here, real quick, Chase, let me go run and grab that, and I'll be right back.
So, getting into the next category, of course, we got debut of the year. And you guys know I like my newcomers. So, this is a really good list for me because when it comes to these people that are coming from these other promotions, when they get that first debut matchup, it could be lightning in a bottle. I'm not going to lie. So, debut these rookie guys, but love to see them. And we're going to go ahead and have Thinker go ahead and run down the numbers for you.
Sure. Yes. So debut of the year, you've got Vinicius Oliveira versus is it Bernardo Sopai? I believe.
Something.
Yeah, I believe it's. I'm pretty sure. And then it's Carlos Prates versus Trevin Giles. Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm, and Mauricio Hufi versus Jamie Malarkey. And the winner, as voted by the MMA Orbit audience, was Carlos Prates versus Seven Giles. I think that is probably no. Okay,
No
Chase is
way,
shaking his head
no
heavy.
way. Are you guys kidding me? So protest, like, okay, so I was talking about more people watch certain cards. Nobody was watching Protest and Giles, I can tell you that. So I don't know how these numbers got there because Vinicius with that flying knee at the buzzer finished him. Listen, okay, shout out Mauricio Hufi. Was a great performance, but we all knew he was gonna finish Jamie Malarkey. Like, come on. And then Kayla Harrison, Holly Holm. That was another coming out of retirement. I know she didn't win, so she's not on the list. It was more of Kayla Harrison, but that come on, we knew she was going to get that done. You see them Pythons anyway. Those are all maybe even better choices than Carlos Freitas. No hate to Carlos Freitas, but for that flying knee, oh my gosh, that's my winner right there. 18% is damn near.
A little
Oh
bit of
my
highway
goodness.
robbery, yeah. And I think that if you're looking at it in terms of like where the person would end up going, then that yeah, I mean that maybe makes a little bit more sense because it's like if it's debut and then look what they went on to accomplish, then sure, Carlos Prates has done a ton in a year. That makes a lot of sense. But as far as just the performance within the fight that they're laying it out as, because that's the thing here. I mean, they're not just putting it as the fighter; they're putting it as the fight, and thus the performance. And so, yeah, no, I would definitely agree yeah, that knee, that was another one that kind of gets a little shortchanged because that was early in the year as well. So we're seeing a lot of that in the a little bit of recency bias going on
True.
some of these fights here. So yeah, I
Yes.
definitely
Well, yeah, Mike, Mike Malott and Neil Magny, that was at the beginning of the year. You're right. And then Vinicius, that was like the first card of the year, second card of the year. So
yeah.
you're cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that like again, it's how you quantify it. But I think that I'm agreeing with that stance. And there's a lot of these lists that we're going to be looking at here have a lot of love for Kayla Harrison. And I think that this is a good example of why that is in something like this list, because if you're looking at it in terms of what they have accomplished, then it's a little bit different than the individual performances, even though this was against Holly Holm was a very good one for Kayla.
And, I want to make my honorable mention first. And I
Sure.
know we don't want to admit it because she had a very short lived career, of course. I mean, she's not done, but she's never coming back. But Wang Tong, that was a great debut for her. You know, she came in and, you know, Brendan Fitzgerald, I love this quote from him, you know, 2 shots on a Saturday night is all you need. So it's a good
Absolutely.
one from her.
Yeah, and I'm seeing Anakin saying Felipe Lima. I would say like that's like a maybe after having seen him fight live in Tampa. I'm not saying that that was a bad performance by any stretch. I would still kind of class that maybe a little bit as like middling compared to some of these other ones that we saw here. But I mean, I guess if you're going again strictly off of the fight, then that was a really clean knockout to start things off for him. That him starting off with. So
I got a great one for you, and I actually wanted to go back to mine. I know we're not going to see many women's fights on here. Shout out Kayla Harrison, she did make a list, but I don't think throughout these lists we're going to see many women's fights. That's just my prediction. So I did want to name another one, and it's not really, you know, Jacqueline Emerine. You know, she did come in and get a submission, and then she got another one. I mean, I know that one doesn't really count in this category, but debut undefeated with all submissions. She came in and got a submission, so she's
that's
another
a
on the list.
yeah, that's a great one, honestly, because Amarim's BJJ is something that I was raving about early on. Just seeing the technicality that she had as a debut fighter, I'd say that that's a really solid choice. Honestly, that I think that actually might be mine as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Honestly, and just because I do what I want sometimes, we're gonna go ahead and enter a debut on the Contender Series from Eunice Dubin, who got a knockout on the Holly Holm clone, and it was beautiful. Mine are plus 1,300 dog, you know, whatever it was. Shout
Yeah.
out her.
Yeah, she actually does come up a little bit farther down in one of these other lists, but you gotta keep it in perspective here because that was a contender series fight. So do you really count it?
No, you
This
can't.
kind, this and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I mean, I think that it's definitely still worth noting that I mean, and then hopefully seeing that there, if she can replicate, oh, buddy, that's going to be something that is going to be it would be dangerous to see going forward. Now, Anakin saying Gene Silva, was this his debut this year? That can't be right, right?
I think that is true. I was thinking back on it, but I know he got a finish, I'm sure, but it was probably just a can. I mean, same thing. I was thinking maybe Josh Van and Tatsuro, maybe, but I think it's like early this year, maybe late last year kind of area. I don't know.
Sure. Now, I mean, and if that was legit, legit starting point for him, then yeah, I mean, I'd say that would be a pretty strong showing as well. But again, you have to look at it in the context of is it the fight itself that you're talking about, or what they would go on to do later on.
I will give one more debut of the year mentioned, and then we will move on because I think it's a great point to end
Mm-hmm.
because Shamil Gaziv did debut this year. Just letting y'all
Gazeev,
know.
future champ right there, people. Come on, dude. Full meal, Shamil.
Yeah, exactly. John Jones still running. So anyway, going on to the next one.
All right, yeah, let's move on. Yeah, so I mean, actually, right up above it, I just noticed it, Dubin and Clark there. But let's run it down. This is upset
Oh,
of the year. Our choices are Anthony Smith versus Vitor Petrino, Dan Hooker versus Mateusz Gamrot, Eunice Dubin versus Shannon Clark, and what is Fernandez's first name? Is it Gabriela? Gabriela
y-
Fernandez? I think it might be Gabriela Fernandez and
sure.
versus Wang Tong. I think that's correct. So yeah, and then of those, it was the winner. There was Dan Hooker versus Mateusz Gamrot. I definitely do not agree with this one. Because I mean, this was that fight was very very close. So if you want to call that the upset part of it, then perhaps. But I don't know. I mean, like Gamrot winning that was not such an in the bag thing to me that it should be upset of the year.
Yeah, I want to make the first point that the last two fights that I talked about, I didn't read ahead. I didn't know they were going to end up on this list, guys. So,
Oh yeah, I mean it's still fine to bring up in the context though.
yeah, and I think it is crazy that Hooker, and, like, what even is this list? Like, I can think of maybe a couple more upsets. Like, I mean, what's his name that just knocked out Petrino? Like, that was a better upset than Anthony Smith. Like, what the heck? So,
Yeah,
that was
Dustin Jacoby.
yeah, there was that one. I'm thinking of an upset in my opinion because like when you this is a community thing. I'm hearing community talk. So like I'm thinking like Tatsuro and Roy Val. In my opinion, Roy Val upset Tatsuro bad. Like that was a huge upset. And you know, and you can even whatever you want to get this term to, like talking about upsets of the year, like how is Ilya Topuria not on this list for either one of his fights? I don't like it's not like in my opinion, I know it's like upset in like the terms of the numbers, but I'm thinking, bro, Ilya ruined like the MMA career for like two dudes. Like, I don't know. That was he upset me, is what I'm saying.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, as far as that kind of an upset, yeah, I would definitely put the Ilya over Max would be that, would certainly made me upset. But in that same line of thinking, then you could probably put fucking Asakura in that category as well. I mean, guy coming in with all this hype out of Ryzen, supposed to be this huge star over there that's going to shake up the division. That certainly upset that plan.
I think another way to think of an upset is like when you have like Kai Asakura is a great example. It's like when the numbers are just like close enough that it's like kind of disrespectful. Like that's I don't know. That's where I'm reaching with this upset term. So I get you with the Kai Asakura thing because people, Discord included, they were thinking Kai Asakura might have a chance. And like anyway, we'll not get into it. But so upset of the year, and to actually go back to this, Dan Hooker and Gamrot, if you want to talk about upset, if you want to talk about reaching the term of like a robbery close to like kind of thing, like that was a weird, like, how did Dan Hooker upset Gamrot in a close, like, I don't know, maybe if you would have finished him, okay, that's a big upset or something, in my opinion. But like going to decision and skating by with your face battered, like, I don't know. That
That's
didn't really ring upset, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like it seems like an odd thing to class as an upset because it wasn't like from both sides of the coin. I wouldn't really put it in that category. If you're looking at it as like, oh, Gamrot should have come in here and had that thing in the bag, I didn't really think it was that going into that fight. And then if you're talking about upset as in like, it being like crazy that he won. I mean, yeah, I'd say that maybe there, as far as like the robbery aspect of it, there's a little bit there, but it wasn't even the worst one in that category either. So, or
I'll
that looking at it.
I'll make this comment based upon this one that I'm seeing on the small sample size. These are not upsets in terms of what the community has decided. These are upsets in terms of like the numbers, like what Vegas decided. So like Fernandez and Wang Tong, like that was a big upset in the numbers department. But honestly, if you really know, Wang Tong probably, once she got to the ground kind of deal, it might have been sketchy, kind of whatever. Same thing with Eunice Dubin and Clark. Like that was a huge upset, but you're like reaching the numbers kind of deal. Like you didn't really know who they were or what they had skill for. Like you just saw one buff girl and a Venezuelan, whatever. So this is Vegas based, and that's how these polls, like, I don't think the options that they had were great. So you just had to pick Dan Hooker and Gamrot because I'm not picking Anthony Smith and Petrino. Like,
I get well, okay. Let me at least show a little bit of respect to that as an option though, because that's one that has been, we're kind of glossing over. But I mean, Petrino at the time was undefeated. I mean, he was coming in with a lot of steam based on that, and of course, Anthony Smith is the Anthony Smith that we know him to be, and especially at that time, was still kind of middling and was in his like the way he was still presenting himself was like this guy who was slightly delusional, thinking that there was still a title run in him. So I mean, like, I think that there's still that it makes sense to have that on the list. I'm good with that one.
The chat is sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. The
Okay,
chat
cooking.
is cooking. It's chat. Okay, so Bilal and Leon. First off, that was a huge, but not by the numbers, but like coming to the narratives, the community narratives, what we believe is going to happen, right? Ferreira and Rebecca, I don't scratch that one. You get Rebecca and the caveman. Talk about that should have been on comeback of the year. Now that I think about it, that could have been on comeback of the year and upset of the year. Like, dude, talk about an upset, dude. Rebecca came through on a lot of people's bet slips. I'll tell you that one. So that's a great one to add in there. Ferreira and Rebecca, whatever. One of that I wanted to add in there, and this was just an upset in my opinion. Dustin Stoltzfus and what's his name? The Canadian.
Oh,
I forget. Mark Andre.
Oh, Mark
That
Andre Barrio, yeah,
that was an upset in my opinion because
sure.
dude, and listen, the numbers were close, Vegas, whatever they want to decide, but I thought Marc Andre had that in the bag, and for him to get flatlined, like, poof.
Yeah, and I also wanted to, if we're going back to some of these in the chat that are being suggested, with Bilal and Leon,
Yeah.
I would say that if in the same line of thinking with that, then you could certainly put Marab and Sean in that category to an extent as well. I mean, again, based on the conventional narratives, because going into that fight, it was all, oh well, if Sean lands the one shot, then it's going to be all over. There was no one shot to be found in that fight.
I was gonna reach for something, but like that was gonna be. Oh yeah, no, actually,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I forgot to bring it up on debut of the year because we just saw it in the chat. Robelis to Spain.
Sure. That was the biggest up and down of the
Oh,
year
up
for sure.
for upset of the year. This is really funny because fucking Waldo didn't do anything. Like, oh god, it was a horrible upset. We
Well,
didn't
and
really do
yeah,
that
you
much.
want to go upset of the year, you could just say Rebellis in the UFC. I would say, you know.
Well, true, 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 true. One more on debut of the year. I can't believe Peyton Talbot did not end up on the list.
Ooh, he was another guy that he debuted this year? Was he late
I
last
think he
year?
debuted this year. I think so. He had his first fight this year. His second fight was the French guy, wasn't it? I could be wrong, but okay,
Might have
maybe
been.
not.
Yeah,
Anyway, upset
trying to
of the
think because
year.
he might have
Thinking
been
of some other
contender
ones, but
series last year and then came in this year with the actual fights. That could be the way that
yeah,
went.
I know. I keep remembering stuff, throwing us off track. Okay, upset of the year, Dan Hooker, Gamera. In my opinion, if that was the choice, maybe, but I would have picked Eunice Dubin probably
Sure,
somewhere.
and I do also want to throw some love to this last minute one here that came in from Anakin. That was Jake Hadley versus
Ah,
a
my bad,
It's Cameron Smotherman, isn't it, or is it Christian
I think it
Smotherman?
is Cameron. I think it. No, there's a different one. I think that's the debut guy. That's the debut one from the Contender Series.
Yeah,
There's
right. Well,
another Smother one. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. This Smotherman that came in on short notice against Hadley and had some really nice work done there. I thought that was a really sharp one as well. So, but actually, it's kind of an asterisk on that because Smotherman had been in the organization and then left, I believe. There was a little bit of oddness as far as like if you can consider that an actual debut, I believe. So
The reason I brought up Peyton Talbot, I remember, is because upset of the year, another community one, in my opinion, was him against Cameron Simon. I think when he whooped him, like that was a pretty big moment in like the division kind of deal because Cameron Simon was a dude that was on the way up. Everybody figured like, oh, he's kind of got some experience. He should be able to handle whoever this Peyton Talbot kid is. But little did we know. So
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, Cam, yeah, it was. And then I
okay.
guess my very last one will move on. But as far as upsets goes, I would put Bo Nickel versus the Scotsman in there as well, just because that was an upsetting fight. Period.
Yeah, I actually like that. The upsetting fights of the year. Listen, I can add a couple more because this is a good category. Uh, upsetting fights of the year.
Right.
Corey Sandhagen and Umar. Oh
Oh
my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah,
One more I can throw at you. Sorry for the goat. Shamil Ghaziv and Rosenstrike. Oh my god, talk about upsetting me. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a crazy dude. That actually we could make a whole thing on that. Anyway,
for sure.
we might come back to that when we see some more on the list. But continue.
All right, all right. Let's move on here. Let's keep plowing through the list here. All right, moving on to breakout star of the year. I like this one. This is they're going cross MMA, of course. It's
Yeah,
not just the UFC.
you see the first choice here. That's
And
crazy.
yeah, Dakota Ditcheva, Diego Lopez, Carlos Praetis, and Shara Magomedov. Shara Bullet, of course. And the pick here is Diego Lopez by a wide margin. Um, I mean, look, we are all great lovers of Diego around here. We're huge fans. I mean, as far as breakout star, Diego had been doing it though, so it's a little bit tough there for me to say that he's a breakout star necessarily just in this year alone.
I kind of agree. When I first saw this list and I see Dakota, I'm obviously thinking, that nobody's going to vote for the female, of course, the woman fighter, not really. And this is normally a UFC fan that's probably looking at this, I would
For
say.
sure.
But so the other three, excuse me, like you said, Diego, breakout star. He did kind of break into stardom kind of deal. Like he's kind of in a groove, I would say. But
Yeah,
you want to, I mean, I would say if we're classifying him as like a breakout star, like how is Alex Pereira not on this list? Like he really broke out into like a superstar role in 2024. Like he's now, what people like they look up to this dude, kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I would say that he was probably already with it because I mean, the whole Izzy
he already
saga
had a
was,
career in
yeah,
glory too.
well, right. I mean, that definitely, of course, but as far as like when he kind of ascended into like the echelon that he has become, like I would say he broke away as a star for sure with the consistency and everything going, and he'll certainly come up a little bit later on in some of these lists. But as far as like breakout throughout the year as like tearing away from the pack kind of thing. I mean, look, you were saying that that like the average person is not going to vote for the female, whatever. If you're not paying attention to Dakota Ditcheva, then you're not paying attention because
True.
she has been making some serious moves, and I would think that she's probably going to be the next, not Kayla Harrison as in like the way that she fights or any of that kind of stuff, but like she is going to be the next breakout star in women's MMA when she's like based on the moves that she's making, because she's already taken over the PFL. They are hanging on to her for dear life. We've talked about that a little bit in the Discord recently because everybody's really liking how she's fighting and what she's doing, but they're saying, when is she going to come over to the UFC? What's her trajectory going to be? And I'm like, the PFL is not letting her go anytime soon if they know what's good for them, which I think is the case. So I would say that if you're not familiar with Dakota Ditcheva, then make sure that you get yourself wised up because she is someone to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, and I actually will say Oban Elliott, great honorable mention by Anakin, and then
Sure.
Peyton Talbot is kind of upsetting not to see on this list. But I do want to shed some light that one, Carlos Freitas is kind of an odd choice for this. I don't think of Carlos Freitas as like star. Like he's just kind of like a dark horse kind of deal. Like he doesn't have the personality that I feel is like the average. Like you gotta just kind of be in with it to be like a Carlos Freitas kind of guy. Like and then I also want to give love to Shara. I think he has a super wide audience, like a fans that he has right now. So maybe that's not why he's like, because he's not breaking out internationally yet. I don't think like he's still kind of like he hangs out in Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia. Like that's like the arenas that he's normally at. So once he starts going global, I know the eye situation. I don't know. I think it'll be more of a breakout situation. But I did want to say that it was good that he was on this list because I do think like Shara's making a name for himself right now. But
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that is going to be the interesting thing with Shara, the more that he ascends. Because I mean, it's like you're absolutely correct that he is starting to become more of a household name. Obviously, the look, the double back fist knockout,
yeah,
that's certainly a highlight of this year for sure. A lot of people have a lot of eyes on him, but I mean, what's he going to be able to do? What is he going to be able to accomplish based on the limited capacity in which he can fight if he's not able to fight in other regions of the world? I mean, this is going to be an interesting kind of conundrum they're going to end up running into depending on where he ends up ascending to. Because I mean, the farther that he gets up in the rankings, the more limited it becomes as to what you're going to be able to do with him. I mean, you can't have every single card throughout the entire year over in the Middle East if this guy is in the top 5. You know what I mean?
yeah. And my honorable mention that I want to
Yeah,
go with, and it's burning me, and I just forgot it. Damn, I was waiting so long to talk about it. But either way,
my bad.
breakout star. Oh no, no. It's so they're kind of excluding champions, which kind of feels weird in this. Like I know champions, I guess you would already expect them to be a star. Maybe that's the classification.
Yeah,
Like if
sure.
you're, but I don't think that's maybe necessarily true because I think Marab has become quite the star this year. All of his, his viral videos that he's been doing, him actually beating Sean at Noche, him taking Mexico with him. I think that is a great honorable mention, even though, he maybe already had somewhat of a low key following, but like Marab wasn't the household name that you would know now. Like it came quick for him. And just
Yeah,
this
yeah.
year, in my opinion.
I think that's valid, honestly. Yeah, based on all of those factors that you just laid out, I think that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to stick with Dakota Ditcheva personally. I know that she's not a UFC fighter, so it's a little
Mhm.
bit harder to quantify. But I mean, if you watch her fights in the PFL, she is smacking of a female star in the making for legitimate reason. I mean, like, and again, she might not be in the UFC, but she just beat Tyler Santos, who was a former title challenger in the UFC. So, I mean, to say that she's like getting cupcake fights over there is just not accurate either.
And I don't want to say this to remove her or exclude Dakota from this poll. He deserves. I think if you were to put UFC only, I think Kayla Harrison would be a great option as well. So I don't know. There's a lot of good honorable mentions that I think can come to mind. But Kayla, she came in, did her thing, won. She finished, and then she came into the number 2 spot and won. I mean, it wasn't the fight that we wanted, but hey, she did win and come from another promotion at, kind of an older age, I believe she kind of is. She's doing her thing. I think that's a good option.
Yeah, for sure. And she'll be getting some love throughout some of these lists
Yeah,
as
go back
well.
to Anakin's comment. I didn't mean to ignore
Oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah, Dakota
No,
having
yeah,
a
yeah,
couple
absolutely.
KOs. Yeah, especially, listen, I've said it before. English women are finishers. So that's all you got to know, Anakin. Just keep it on the back burner.
But yeah, I mean, it's a very good point though. Not only having KO power, having knockout power, just as a female fighter in general, that's always something to keep an eye on. But having multiple knockouts consecutively, because I mean, she's been tearing through the competition. Now you see people, not just women, but women and men in the PFL tear through the competition because the PFL is really a great incubator for high level talent to just break away. Like the highest of the high and the lowest of the low in the PFL, like they separate very quickly. There's not a lot of like middle ground. You get like breakout stars really easily in a tournament system. So you're seeing Dakota like showing that, and so you could say that there's a little bit of bias based on that. That she doesn't have the strength of competition, but like I said, she's just fought Tyler Santos and got a really nice win in that fight as well. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a strong case there.
I'm really excited to get into the next one, so I will let us roll into it.
Yeah,
But
why
my
don't you
last,
introduce it?
well, yeah, I actually wanted to add one last point
Sure.
because I think there's people that could be on these polls, a lot of them, and I want to give. What do you classify as a star? Because I think Eunice Dubin could be on this list. Anyway, to the next one, we'll go on. Event of the year. These are the top 4 choices we got. Noche UFC or UFC 306, UFC 300, UFC 308, and UFC Tampa. And the winner by a clear victory was UFC 300. And I think, to start, that is kind of harsh. There was some pretty good cards. UFC Tampa is crazy to be on this list. But I think Noche could have been closer. It could have been like 40, like 45, 55. Noche was really solid for what they had intended and they pulled off and what they were going for up until the co-main and main event. Like it was solid. Like they had it down and I really appreciate all that they did. Another one that is really good, UFC 308. I can't even remember what it is. Hold on, give me 1 second. But it is good. Let me just double check.
Yeah, refresh our memories here.
UFC 308, Ilya and Max. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no
Sure.
wonder I didn't remember. I've erased it from my brain. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that is definitely one that could be closer. And I understand why nobody wanted to vote for it because Ilya ruined our lives. So whatever. But yeah, go ahead. Because I actually got one more, but I'll hold on to it.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm agreeing with a lot of the points that you're making here. I would say that I do agree that with with the voters here, that 300 was the best event of the year. But I mean, I do also acknowledge that Noche, as far as the spectacle goes, I think that it was a landmark for the sport. Period. Personally, I mean, like if you're just talking about quality of fights, yeah, I would say 300 was the best. But as far as the presentation and what they did with the Noche card, the sphere and all those elements of it, there's really never been anything like it. And short of them doing another show at the sphere, I don't really foresee there being anything bigger than that. As far as the pageantry of the sport goes, it really harkened back to like the Pride days and the shows in Japan with the over the top presentation. Like it really like got you like it I don't know, as like an MMA fan, it really like made my like heart swell a little bit, because it was like, man, this really is the sport that we all fucking love so much, and like it deserves this level of grandiosity. So I respect Noche very, very much. I really it would be a very close second to me. 300 absolutely takes the cake though, as far as quality overall. It was the best. You cannot beat the BMF fight. That is I mean, it's going to be hard to top that as far as fights in general go for me for a while at least. And then my honorable mention, which is not on this list, I'd say UFC Macau was fantastic.
No, no, no. You got to hear my honorable mentions
Please.
first off, because I think Anakin just said it. It was UFC 100, right? Was that Protest and Magny? Not UFC
Oh,
100.
the
Fight Night
UFC,
100.
yeah, Fight Night 100. Sure, yes, it was.
Yes. So that was a great one. Anakin, shout out you because that was going to be on my list. And I
Yep.
think another one or two that suffer from being really early in the year 298, 299. I thought those were really I think I'm really just showing my love because I think 290 was it okay, 295 with Alex and Yuri. That was great. That wasn't even this year. I'm thinking of the Yuri and Alex second one. But that was great. Duplessis and Izzy, the Australia card was great. I'll tell you one just because I'm extending the list to ones that are maybe not great. We already did that a little bit, but not great. UFC London. I think it was London. Paris. No.
Manchester.
Manchester,
Oh,
wherever
well,
the fuck
yeah,
I
that
said
that was
Paris. LOL.
Bilal. Yeah, Bilal and Leon was
Yeah.
the Manchester card, but there was UFC Paris was also a pretty good card overall. Actually, that was Renato Moicano and
Oh,
Benoit Saint Denis.
damn, we really had we got spoiled this
Well,
year, guys.
that's
Come
yeah.
on.
I mean, that's the overall point of all of this is that 2024 was just a fantastic year for fights in general. We got really. This has been one of the best years, like overall. Like if you take it as far as the entire year goes, from like beginning of the year on, even the like. I remember the very first card of the year. I had covered it on Yama because I did. There was the one card that I had missed the watch along for. Had some extenuating circumstances for that one, but came back, did the rewatch, and I was like, if this is the baseline to start off the year, it wasn't anything fireworks. It was it wasn't like some over the top amazing deal, but it was at least good enough for if this is how like the mid is going to be, then we're going to be okay. And then from there, it just snowballed into some amazing stuff. How about a little love for the cards that people thought were going to be ass and turned out to be great, like the Virna Jandiroba card. That
Yeah.
that was a great one where everyone's like, "How the hell is she headlining?" Bob. That turned out to be a really solid card.
Yeah, that's actually crazy you remembered that one. I'm not gonna say it was a bad card, but that's a good memory. One that I wanted to throw out there. I actually wanted to just add some insight. I think what was great to know is the two cards that I felt kind of were like so when we're up on the bar and then like we stop and then we keep going up and then it stops and keep I think those two spots where it kind of hiccuped and rightfully so. I'll give you the reasons. UFC 301 in Brazil, rightfully so, right after the one of the biggest events at the time.
Sure.
That you can have reasons why that wasn't the event that it maybe could have been, but it was still a great event, in my opinion. Another one, we already talked about it, Bilal and Leon, the timing of it. You clearly can see that that's just it hinders the experience. I don't know. I can just say that that just shuffled the momentum a little bit because we had after 300 everybody was like wondering like, oh, here's 301 Brazil, and then they're like, man, this is not what we should be expecting. That's what the community was saying. I liked it, but I think it was great that that was rightfully so the lowest point of the year in pay-per-view terms, kind of deal.
And you're talking about the timing as in it being at like the middle of the night slash early in the morning for them, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about being right after 300.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
they didn't get
then let me
the stardom.
sure. Well, then let me also add that that was another thing that hindered that card was the fact that it was taking place, on the American pay-per-view time schedule and being presented to the local crowd, the in arena crowd in the middle of the night slash morning. I mean, the main event starting at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning is just wild to think about.
Yeah, another card that comes to mind as a really great card, Roy Val and Tatsuro. I know I talked about it earlier, but that whole card I can't tell you exactly what happened, but I know that that whole card felt really good. I can remember just the feeling I had watching it.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about it a whole bunch this year in general, how this has really been a great year for the lower weight classes
mhm.
as well. We've been seeing a lot of really great fights and a lot of new talent coming into the lower weights. That's going to be an infusion in those divisions. So I think that just as like a general atmosphere kind of thing, the bantamweights and the flyweights have had really good year as well, like just in totality. So a lot of great elements just in general. So not just event, but just 2024 as a year has seen a lot of greatness when it comes to this sport. It's been really fun to witness.
I will give light to it because we're gonna move on to the next segment with it, but we didn't mention at all. I think it was 290, not 293. God damn, Makachev and Poirier. That was a good
Sure.
card as well. So I think these could all be on their own list somewhere. It depends on which ones you throw on the poll. Like you can't have them all, but when you shuffle them down, UFC Tampa definitely could not be on this list in my opinion.
Well,
But
and maybe it's a bias of me being in person, but I would definitely say that Tampa was better than the Poirier Makachev card in total. But
okay.
I would say that the main event of that pay-per-view kind of made up for some of the shortcomings. It wasn't a terrible card. I mean, like I'm really trying to. It's struggle. I have to struggle to think of like a very very bad card this year. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like one that was like as bad as the older UFC London or like UFC Hamburg back in the day, and like any of those kind of levels of like boredom that I was feeling. I really didn't like get too deep into it this year where it was like awful to be like an experience that was terrible or anything. I thought that overall there really wasn't anything that was standing out as like, man, this is like the really really baddest that the sport's been. No, it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I get you. 100%.
So yeah. All right. Well, then let's continue on down the line here. This is submission of the year. Your choices were Patty Pimblett versus Bobby Green, King Green, Dricus Duplessis versus Israel Adesanya, Hamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whitaker, and Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. And the winner by a decent margin, I would say, is Hamzat Chimaev versus Robert Whitaker. What do you think about that?
It was definitely the most devastating submission of the year, due to the injury with the injury that Robert Whitaker sustained after or during the fight, I should say, with his teeth and his mouth. Definitely one that you don't want to be in, and you think, man, that's a submission right there. I'll give you that. That one is one for the ages. But other good options on the list, Patty, put him unconscious and kind of broke his arm a little bit. It was kind of a good one, especially with the hype around the fight. That was kind of a main event in its own world kind of deal. So I give Patty the nod on this one. Dreekis, though, the fact that he got that sub without the body triangle, I don't know. It was just a goofy submission, and Izzy just looked goofy getting it. So it's a funny one to be on the list, but I do think it's also one that could be a lot higher in the percentages. And Makhachev and Poirier, I think that one we knew he should be able to sub Poirier. It just took a lot longer than it should have. So submission of the year, no. Honorable mention. I don't know if I can maybe give you one. I'm trying to think. I'll let you go ahead while I think on that one.
Sure. I mean, I have to say that for my choice would definitely be Dricus over Izzy, and I'll tell you why. Israel Adesanya had not been submitted up until that point, and
Yeah.
as the dominant champion that Adesanya was, and how decent he was looking in that fight going into the sequence. Really, I mean, that's that was one that was an option for comeback of the year, and I could understand why, or at least that was a suggestion that I think I saw Anakin make in the chat. I could understand that being some people's perception of it. I don't think that it was so much of a far ahead pull away that it would really classify as that. But as far as the impressiveness of the submission based on those factors, then yeah, I mean, to have gone unsubmitted in his entire career up until that point and have it be of all people with all styles, Dricus Duplessis. Yeah, I'd say that again, the circumstances surrounding it would be my choice based on this list. The one I did want to ask about, I saw Anakin suggested Yair versus Brian. Brian Ortega's. If that was this year, then that would also be a comeback of the year contender as well. But I thought that was last year. Maybe
Nope.
that was this year too.
Yeah, that happened like a little bit before Noche because he pulled out of Noche, right? Something like that. No, he
Oh
wasn't
well,
at
it was
Noche.
it had to be well before Noche then, because I mean that would have been the fight before that, but he had gotten pretty battered in that fight, so I think he had to take some time off, and then the pullout was was one of those earlier cards that that was the Dan Ige and Diego Lopez situation.
Yeah, another submission of the year. There was a lot of stupid ones, standing gillies that happened. Like Ihor and Michelle. That was a good one.
Sure.
Another stupid standing gilly that happened. Oh my God, there's actually two. Ryan Spann and OSP is one that comes to mind. Wow, what a goofball move. And second, Antonio fucking Tricoli. Oh
Yeah,
my
that's the
gosh,
one I was
that
going to say.
loser.
Shout out to the tough boys, though. Oh, did we lose Chase? We lost Chase. Hold on. There he is.
We
He's back.
lost me.
Yeah, say,
Whoa.
talking about losers, then we end up losing Chase. He's
Yeah.
back.
Anyway, he was coming for me.
But yeah, no, that was that was Trayshawn Gore who got that one, and yeah, that was a really nice one for him, but very much a another low IQ kind of move on Tricoli's part. I mean, well, and then that just reminded me that somewhere in this in the conversation, as far as like if we, there's, I guess maybe there should just be its own category for low fight IQ, because I'm like, where does Kron Gracie get to be placed into all of this? Because he, like, again, I would say this in the low IQ category. So maybe not any of the like upsets or anything like that, but it just reminded me, we're talking low IQ when we were talking about Jalen Turner and then Antonio Tricoli, that you cannot speak on low fight IQ when it comes to this level of the sport at this time in the sport's history and not mention Kron Gracie. But anyway, go back to what you were saying before you got cut off there.
No, yeah, I think another one that is maybe left off the list doesn't. I don't know when they made this list because this card is very recent. Pantoja getting a sub on Kai Asakura is another one that is a submission of the year, in my opinion. He stopped the hype train. You're not going to give this dude a title shot like this. Like, come on. So that was a great one, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, and actually, just seeing that Anakin had suggested Shore versus Zalal. I would say that Yusuf Zalal is somebody who should also be put into the mix as far as breakout star of the year goes for me. I mean, the tear that he has been on lately, that fight with Billy Q was one of the best performances of the year, I would say, as well. So, I mean, like, that should be in the male fighter of the year category, or like, I'm very, very high on Zalal right now based on the stuff he's been doing. So I think that there's definitely a mention in there for him based on all of those factors. As far as other submissions go that I'm seeing coming in, I do think that it's worth mentioning the Holland armbar on Mikhail Olashechuk. Was pretty goddamn brutal indeed. Anakin saying that, and I agree. So I would say that that's in the honorable mentions on that one as well. There's been a lot of great ones this year. It's hard to pick when it comes to finishes like that.
Yeah, actually, if you want one that's a really oddball, just because it was an upset also on my birthday, I'll consider it an upset because it upset me on my birthday. Submission of the year goes to Sergey Spivak with the armbar on Marcin Tybura. There
Let's
you
go.
go. I'll give it
Absolutely.
to him.
Yeah, that's. I'd say that there you go. If you wanted to think about cards that were on the lower end of the spectrum, maybe that'd be one of them,
Yeah.
perhaps. But yeah, so I mean, I think that we went through a couple of really good ones on there. I mean, I'm seeing a couple of these other ones. Lost Chase again. Chase is he's
This
back and
is
forth.
really
Yeah, I don't
crazy.
know what's going on today. We're having a
Mm.
little bit of connection issues, but par for the course. You know how that goes. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we had some good ones. I did want to throw some love to Gerald Mearshart, who may not be a breakout star of the year, but is always a star in the hearts of the real ones.
While we go into this next category, I'm gonna reload the
Sure.
page.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? That might be the way to go. All right, we're going to be without Chase for just a second here. But while he's getting himself reconnected, I will set up the next category, which is the knockout of the year. I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot coming in the chat on this one. So throw them in if you got them. But while we wait for Chase to repopulate here. Here he is. Let me grab Chase
There we
back
go.
in here.
Hopefully that makes it better. I don't know why my connection's at 2 bars right now, but either way.
Yeah, well, I was just setting up the next category, which is knockout of the year. And I was saying that there's going to be a lot of a lot in contention for this one. But starting it off, you had Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. You had Shara Magomedov versus Armand Petrosian. You had Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. You had Vinicius Oliveira versus Bernardo Sopai. So, of those, the clear and far away favorite and winner was Max Holloway over Justin Gaethje. I know that there's going to be a ton of others that come to mind. So, what are you thinking about that as the pick?
I think first I want to give shout out to Anakin for cooking real quick with
Yeah,
some
Anakin
ones
has
that I
been cooking.
didn't. Okay, so Muslim Salikov, I'll give you that one. I didn't think
Spinning
he was going
kick.
to do
Yep.
that. Spin kick. Myron Santos, he cooked Fly. Like, bro, he like held his head right there and just like bopped him a few. It was bad. Another honorable mention just because we just saw it. What was his name? Damn, I can't. Mr. Spaniard.
Oh,
And
yeah. Joel Alvarez.
Joel Alvarez. That's another
Yep.
honorable mention. But I want to go ahead and break down knockout of the year. When I think of knockout, I think of devastation. Like you knocked him out. Like that was like devastating. Max definitely deserves to be on this list, but I think a contention, and I don't know how it's not, at least over Oliveira and Sopai, even though I know I talked about the flying knee, it was great. How is Yuri and Alex too not on this list? I'm telling you, talk about devastating. Like Alex really, he like murdered a man that night. Like it was really, I was worried for Yuri walking away from that kind of deal. Um, Another one that I think is a good one to mention, obviously, Shara, the double back fist, really great one. Could high. I think again, you're seeing a lot of 300 bias here. I know Max was a great one, but one that's also devastating, and it should be higher than Topuria and Holloway, was Topuria and Volkanovski. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, so if we're talking about, and again, there's a lot that goes into how you look at these things, right? So it's like, if you're talking about strictly the knockout itself, then it's a little bit different than talking about like the impressiveness of the circumstances surrounding the knockout, which I would say that if you're looking at it in those terms, Holloway versus Gaethje does make sense because now, whenever you see anyone from here on out pointing to the ground, you know exactly what they're referencing and where they got it from. You know what I mean? So I think that there's definitely a merit to that, even with 300 bias. Shara with the double back fist, we've talked about that. I mean, it certainly is impressive, certainly something that we have not seen before. So you got to give some love to that. I want to give a huge, huge honorable mention shout out to Lonier Kavanaugh on the Contender Series because that was devastating brutality. That's what made me think of that was the way that you were saying. If you're talking about just a knockout where it was like that was the like you sent that person into the shadow realm, that certainly was it. Yeah, go for it, brother.
Yeah, you cooked right into Anakin's first on the list here. Shi Ming, the
Yo,
Doctor Sleep. She is devastating when it comes to knocking people out. Obviously,
Doctor Sleep. I love
dude,
it. That's a great nickname for her.
she's she's so sweet and innocent, and the fact that she can do that to somebody, dude, she's a beast. So she deserves some love as well.
For sure.
KKF and Urseg is obviously a great one. I don't think Pfeiffer and Marc Andre, because I knew Pfeiffer, at least in my opinion, I thought Pfeiffer was going to go knock him out at the time. So that's none of your business. Anyway, I like Marc Andre. Anyway, yeah, we could go on forever with
I know
this list.
that's what I was saying. This was going to be like one that was going to have a million of them. I did also want to show some love to this one here. Matt Frivola versus Zayam with the that amazing knee that Zayam landed to put Frivola out. That was a beautiful one for sure. And then also the body shot knockout from Pretes versus Li Jin Liang.
Oh, that wasn't a body shot, brother. He popped him, and he never been knocked
There was
out.
that. What was the one before that? Must have been that one then.
Oh,
The Carlos Prates body shot was the one I'm
that was
talking about then.
your buddy, fucking blood brother Pride or something.
Oh, the fucking Radke.
Yeah,
that was Radke. It was the body shot.
The knee, yeah, that was definitely him.
Oh man, yeah, I spaced on that one. Then there you go. Sure.
Yeah,
But then also the other honorable mention that I had to throw on this one, and I bias or otherwise, I'll fucking wear the bias like a coat of armor. But my motherfucking man, Cub Swanson, getting the job done against Billy Q in Tampa, being able to see that one live is a highlight of my MMA fandom. So I had to throw some love to the OG Cub Swanson.
yeah, I think Anakin really cooked here. Nicolau and Perez, that was probably one of the first cards of the year, I think. Maybe the second. And
Yeah,
that was devastating. Like for him to just sleep him, like where he's like folded up against the cage, like bro, that was a knockout. Like that was list worthy at least. I give it to you. If you had a long list, he could be on there.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, again, we knew that there was going to be a million of them coming in, so
Yeah.
all of these are great choices and great things to go back and bring up. So Anakin, as always, a shout out to him for cooking as he is. But again, we could go through a million of them, and they're all very impressive. But I
Yeah,
think that
I
we've
got one
yeah,
more,
sure,
and
go
then
for
we're
it.
moving on.
Yeah.
Uh what the hell is his name? Johnny Walker and Uzdemir. That was
Oh,
devastating knockout. That was a goofy one, but it's Johnny Walker. He gets knocked out. So making a knockout of the year list, whatever.
yeah, and I mean, you could put Magomed on there as well.
Yeah,
For the
and
Johnny Walker with that.
true. And if you want to reach to not, I mean, well, never mind. It's a knockout. I get you. So moving on. Yeah,
Yeah.
Stolfus. We talked about
And
Stolfus.
and, Michael Johnson, getting the knockout over Zaitar was a beautiful one as well. So I mean, like, we've had again, it's been an amazing year for the sport. So knockouts have been abound, and we've just been very lucky to be blessed with so many of them. But let's move on from it, because
Good
if
deal.
not, we're gonna be more down in it forever. So let's move on to one that is going to be also probably pretty contentious. But this is the fight of the year. We got your choices as Esteban Ribovics versus Daniel Zellhuber, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier, and Mateusz Rambecki versus Miktabek Orlabai. The winner by a decent margin on here, the BMF fight, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, and you can see that my little check mark is right there next to it. That was certainly my choice out of this list. What did you think, sir?
I think this is a pretty good list, maybe excluding Islam and Poirier. Like, I mean, it was a
Yeah,
great fight. It was, but it was kind of just like we were all praying for a miracle kind of deal. Like,
right.
so fight of the year, these other ones, I tell you, Rebecki and Orabai, wow, that was a fight. Zellhuber and Ribovics, these dudes were trying to kill each other for sure. Gaethje and Holloway, that was what you would want out of a fight. It's like 5 rounds, and then a knockout in the last 2 seconds or whatever. So it was just like picture perfect kind of deal. I think another one that I'm trying to think of her name, Aldana with that big old cut on her head. I don't want to say that's
Ooh,
fight of the year, but like, I mean, she put up a fight of the year. I'll tell you that. Like,
yeah, for
golly,
real. Fighting through adversity for sure.
yeah. So I know I'm trying to think of some other fights of the year that were like polarizing, like that's the way that I would think of a fight of the year. How is Alex not on these lists more? I'm actually very concerned. Like, are we not Alex stands in this community? How has he not been on these polls? Not once, I don't think.
Yeah, Alex and Khalil should absolutely be on fight of the year in fight of
True.
the year contention for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, seeing some of these other ones coming in, as always, Anakin holding us down here. I'd say that Onama versus Romero is one that is definitely honorable mention worthy there.
Jan and Figgy.
Jan versus Figueiredo absolutely was a banger for sure. Yeah, going back to the MMA orbit list, I would say that Rambecki versus Orlabai is one that I think should be a little bit more, higher up in the percentages, because that was an absolute war. Um, Again, my bias is showing. I don't give a fuck. Cup versus Billy Q is a war up until the knockout as well. So I'd say that there's potential there a little bit. Not, it's low down on the list, but if you're making a full on, 40 fight list or whatever, it should certainly be in the equation.
I
Um,
think Anakin came
yeah,
here with City and Tavares too is great.
yeah,
Um,
that was a good one.
And then same thing with Pantoja and Ursig. I feel like was kind of Roy Valentiara. It was like back and forth, round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, and then it came down to that final round. Who was gonna, who had more of it, who had more
Yeah.
willpower kind of deal. And I think that's what you love.
Right, and that's the basic, overall view of a Royval and Tyra, in that same, breath as well,
Yeah.
that being such a back and forth, almost chess match kinda deal where and I really like that fight in this conversation as well because it was not only was it back and forth and, round by round who's taking it at what time, but it was a great display of the mixed part of mixed
Yeah.
martial arts because it was striking at sometimes, it was some really, really high level grappling and wrestling at other times, and it was just a back and forth of both of those. So, yeah, that's one that definitely gets put into the conversation. Also, yeah, Dober and Gene Silva. I mean, that's one that should be in there as well. Quite a war. You're talking about Aldana, in the cut she went through. Dober getting put through fucking hell in that fight, and still, coming through and fight until he couldn't fight anymore. I mean, all the respect in the world to Drew Dober. Talk about a guy who makes fans when he loses fights.
Fight of the year. I think if you're gonna include Poirier and Makhachev, like how didn't you give DDP and Izzy is kind of my thing. I think that would have been a really good choice. Another one that I think it kind of slipped by my head as soon as I talked about DDP and Islam, but we could talk forever about the fight of the years, man.
Right.
That's
It's
just
just
how
been a
it
great
goes.
year for it. I mean,
Yeah,
again, this is another
exactly.
one that, it's hard to pull out specifics when you have so many great ones. And, it really is a credit to where we are in the history of this sport. Especially, we mentioned a little bit about 140 when we started the stream. It's a good thing to note if you go back and look at a card like that. Now, there were some really good fights on that card, but you can see the levels to this sport and where it has gone to based on a card like that versus what we have gotten throughout the course of this year. So, when it comes to where you put any one of these fights that we're talking about or any other ones that you could mention in the equation, it really is like a testament to how far the sport has come as far as technicality goes, as far as the disciplines that people are drilling to the point of being able to get finishes, things like that. We're always going to be in the best version of the sport as time progresses, and it's really showing, especially when you compare it to cards as far back as 140 was, because that was 2011, I believe. So
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm really excited going forward because looking at how good the list is that we have to pick from and like what is excluded is such a vast list of great fights. So the next year going into it, man, I'm really excited that there's going to be even better fights that we have going. So,
always, it just gets better and better. I appreciate
oh,
that.
I
Yes.
remember
Okay.
Kaio. Didn't he have a 5-round really good
Oh,
fight
with
with
Jared
somebody?
Cannonier. Yes, he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, that was a really
Absolutely.
good fight.
Yeah, good one to add in there. Absolutely, coming in at the buzzer.
Yep.
All right, let's move on here to the next category. We're getting into the home stretch on this one. This is female fighter of the year, and this one is pretty perplexing to me. So I
Do
want you
my
to talk.
eyes deceive me? Like,
This is well, and this I saw this on another list, and I was like, oh, we'll talk about it when we get to that list because surely this is a fluke that's on the other list, but I'm seeing it here too. I hadn't picked up on it when I did my overview of all of these, but let's go through it. It's your choices are Zhang Weilei, Kayla Harrison, Dakota Ditcheva, and Jasmine Jazdavicius. Wild list to begin with. But your winner, even more wild with 54%, over 54, almost 55%. This is a clear and definite winner, is Zhang Weilei with her one fight against Yan Xiaonan in this year. What's going on here, Chase?
I don't know, but it is actually crazy that the minds of other, female fighters in contention of this label come to mind because Zhang Weili did fight early in the year. She had her one fight. She did China versus China, and she came out on top. And I think that is, really big, considering this is a community supported thing. Well, maybe I don't know, but I think Kayla Harrison is another good option. She did come in, like I said before, she got a finish right away, and then she did take the number 2 spot. That's a really big jump. Dakota
Yeah.
being on the list, another great option. We already talked about her before. She probably could have won because man, she is killing. And like I feel like in the public, like the social media space, like Dakota runs that area. Zhang Weilei she doesn't really like she's not really I don't know. She's not really big on social media. You never really see highlight mixes of her and stuff like that. Dakota though, she's all over. Jasmine, ridiculous. That's a ridiculous name.
The fact that
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. The fact that she is on this list at all, I mean, I think it really speaks to the lack of love that women's MMA gets just in a general sense, which is very unfortunate in my opinion. There's some amazing female fighters out there, and I would think that there are probably a lot other choices that could have filled out that last slot on the poll here. But yeah, I mean, look, Zhang Weilei had a great showing. We talked about how amazing that was, but on the flip side of that coin, Yan Xiaonan came back and had an amazing showing of her own at Macau. So I mean, like, to have Zhang Weilei as that far and away the winner of this poll based on the dynamics just seems a little bit off to me. I mean, maybe you could say that's like an inverse thing. Oh, well, it's like, yeah, if Yan Xiaonan did so well later on, then it just shows how much better Zhang Weilei is. But if it's the single fight aspect of it, that to me like makes it like, why? Kayla Harrison has had a much more breakout year as far as this list goes, and Dakota Ditcheva has like tore through all of her competition in the PFL. Again, this is completely promotion bias as far as I'm concerned. I am tending to kind of say, and I know this might be a little crazy, but I might be giving it to Dakota.
No, I think there's somebody crucial that's excluded from the list that I'm not sure what the quota is on why, Jasmine would make it and Valentina Shevchenko would not make this list, who
Sure,
came
come
back
on.
and reclaimed her belt. If we're going to base it off one fight, I mean, Valentina came back and did it at the biggest event. It may not have been the best fight of the year. That maybe that is taking into account like female fighter of the year. She had one fight and she was amazing. Like that was the best form of a female fighter, sure. But Kayla, sure. Whoever I just named, Valentina. And I'm trying to think of one more of a really good one. Manafjord.
Yeah, I
That's
was
who it
gonna
was.
say.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say. Anakin yet again cooking in the chat.
Yeah, man. And
Manon Fiorot beating Rose and Aaron Blanchfield. Certainly a name that absolutely should be on that list over Jasmine. That's really not even hatred to Jasmine Jasdovicius. She had a fantastic performance against Priscilla Kashweda, which I thought was a really standout performance, and I felt great about that one. Being that Kashweda is such a dirty fighter and deserved to be taken down a peg, so I really was happy about that. But to have Jasmine Jasdovicius over Manon Fiorot or even Natalia Silva, that's another option on here that Anakin had thrown in, which, again, I'd say that's probably slightly lower down, but still, worthy-ish. Yeah, I mean, I think that those are all options that make more sense.
I tell you one name that you're never going to think of, but it could definitely replace Jasmine if we're reaching that far into the barrel here. Because this person that I'm going to name actually made history this year. Pooja Tomir, first Indian
Ah,
fighter to win in the organization. How is that not fighter of the year worthy? I mean, listen, I'm not saying much, but if she can have one fight and win fighter of the year, Zhang Weilei, Pooja Tomir, listen.
yeah. Pooja could certainly be in that conversation, and had she not lost as emphatically as she did, then I think that Wang Tong would have certainly been in this conversation as well, based on history making performances with her. One of the quickest knockouts, if not the quickest, in women's MMA, I believe. I think it
Yeah,
might be the second quickest.
something like that. I'm trying to think of one more because, female fighter of the year, Jacqueline Emery again. She came in, got 3 subs, and I'm pretty sure she's still undefeated out there. So good for her. I would
And
say that's a good option.
look, as far as history goes as well, we would be absolutely remiss, especially this show specifically would be remiss if we did not mention history making Jillian Robertson with the first elbow to anus in the history of MMA. So
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
gotta throw that in there.
I think another honorable mention, but she is losing on the year now, but I think Luana Santos was a good option up until she lost. She was making a name for herself and she was coming along. So sucks.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, really, I think that what we're exhibiting here, and what I think the takeaway from this conversation is that it's there's certainly a talent pool that is wider than what we're seeing in this list, and certainly wider than the margin that Zhang Weilei won by based on this. I mean, to have Zhang Weilei with the single fight taking this entire category by storm, basically, just is not correct. I mean, I don't. That's just kind of the where I gotta draw the line on it. Now, I'm not saying that she shouldn't be in the conversation. Of course, she's a dominant champion. She definitely deserves her flowers, but there's a lot more going on in women's MMA than just the name
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, oh, and Norma Dumont. Yeah, that would also be a nice dark horse there. Of course, we talked about the Irene Aldana fight. So
We
that was.
we see robberies all the time. I'll give you a good little robbery on this female fighter of the year, Macy Chasson. I don't know why. I just keep thinking of her. So
Hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate the mention of Macy Chiasson. She's somebody who does not get enough praise, I believe. I think she's a much better fighter than people are giving her credit for at the moment. So I like that one.
yeah, absolutely. Oh,
Yeah,
actually, one last. Oh, wait.
sure. No, go ahead.
No. This will be moving into the
Okay.
next one.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's set it up then. Of course, this is the main event of the evening, so to speak. This is male fighter of the year. Your choices were Ilya Taporia, Joaquin Buckley, Alex Pereira, and Dricus du Plessis, and by a very, very, very overwhelming wide margin, 65.7%, Alex Pereira takes it. What do you have to say, sir?
I want to first point out to everybody that Joaquin Buckley had more votes than Dricus du Plessis. That was an oddball to start off with, but the fact of the matter is more people thought that, so just want to point that out. Second,
Sure.
I think Buckley should not be on this list, but that's my opinion. I think John Silva should maybe be on this list. A fighting nerd at the least, him or Praitis for male fighter of the year, coming in undefeated. John Silva, he had 2 knockouts in 14 days, I believe it was. Maybe it was 7 days because he might have even fought that next week. I don't remember what it was. So that is history. But my pick is gonna unfortunately go to Ilya Taporia. I know I've been raving about Alex all night, but in the sport, the UFC, Ilya became the top of the food chain this year. I know Alex is, but he kind of already has been. Like, I don't know. We haven't really thought like Jamal Hill is going to beat Alex or Yuri's going to beat him this time. Like, I don't really. Ilya, there was some speculation, but he solved that quick, and he's now the 145 king. And Alex is too, but it is a tough one to make.
So, and I knew that this conversation was going to go down. So I'm going to go with Alex, and I'll tell you why. Alex has cleared out essentially the majority of his division, and he did it in such quick succession this year. That would be the deciding factor for me. And I'm not saying that you're wrong with the Ilya pick, because all of your points are perfectly valid. And that's really, I think, the takeaway from this conversation, because it really was always going to come down to Ilya or Alex when you're having the fighter of the year conversation for 2024. But for me, the criteria that I'm looking at with it is the fact that Alex saved 2 events, if not 3. I mean, they were trying to make it seem like he was saving a 3rd event. It wasn't really that. They were just scheduling him for a 3rd event. But that in and of itself was wild when you think about the fact that he fought once, 2 months later came back, fought again, 4 months later came back and fought again, all within the span of 1 year, won all of his fights. That would be my criteria and why I'm going with Alex.
Yeah, I completely agree. Alex, gosh, fight of the year, man, or fighter of the year. Like, he really is, he's just a wrecking ball right now. So it's hard not to pick him because he really is taking the sport by storm kind of deal. Like, I feel like he's getting levels that not many people are getting to. Like, if Connor's up here superstardom, like Alex ain't that too far behind when it comes to UFC terms, but he's closer to everybody. I don't know. He's closer to Connor than he is everybody else at this point, I feel like, is the point I'm making.
The aura is certainly surrounding him. And I mean, I think that that's also something to bring up in general when it comes to Alex. The fact that he has been able to cultivate the following and fan base and the aura, as people say, just without speaking English. He bases it really on the persona that he wears and his activity in the cage. Fighters are out here going out of their way, jumping through hoops, I would say, to try to generate a tenth of the aura that Alex Pereira walks around with naturally. So that certainly plays a factor here. But if we're going a little bit farther down, I want to play a slight devil's advocate just to say that Joaquin Buckley, I do think it is absolutely wild that he got more votes than Dricus. That is crazy. But his knockouts were really nice, and had the doctor not stopped the fight in Tampa, I think that also could have potentially been another highlight worthy performance there. It's going to always be a what if at this point now, of course, but I think that he had a very good year. So including him, maybe not in the top 4, but somewhere, if we're talking about honorable mentions, I think that it's fine to throw him a slight bone on that one. But if we're getting into honorable mentions, then I think that we already had named a couple. I think that Youssef Zalal would be one of my guys that I mean, if not fighter of the year, then certainly breakout of the year would make sense for him. Seeing a couple other ones that might make somewhat of sense. I mean, like Marab, based on the domination in the fight that he had against Sean, certainly makes sense for that.
Pantoja would be a cool option to ever see, but
Yeah,
Diego Lopez
Pantoja.
was also another one that I say could probably go up there, but he's not up there yet. Shara, hey, listen, he's knocking people out left and right, and he's done it this year. So, hey, why not? I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, he's certainly making a believer out of a stubborn guy like me when it comes to that. So, I got to give him credit there. Kaio, is another, I mean, just fighting nerds in general, of course, we'll talk about them in a little while. But, I think that Kaio has had a really good year too. I mean, I was very high on Lerone Murphy. I'd say that after the Ige fight, he kind of looked a little bit more human. So, there's a little bit of less aura than he might have had before that, based on the Edson Barbosa fight. But definitely a good year for him. Yeah, I mean, there's you're going through all of the names, and there's also there are a bunch of good options that are in that equation. So I think that really it's always going to be based on this year, Ilya, Alex, and then whoever else. You know what I mean? So I think that the conversation that we had surrounding the top 2 makes the most sense, and then you can kind of throw in whoever you want after that, because there have been a lot of great guys fighting this year.
Yeah, 100%.
So that rounds out the MMA Orbit polls. That is the based on the other fans and what the climate of the fan base is looking like. We have a couple of other ones that we can kind of run through a little bit quicker. We don't need to necessarily dwell on everyone as much, because there's going to be a lot of overlap here. But let's take a quick look at it. We'll go over to ESPN's MMA Awards, and we'll go through this. Top down. So we're not going to start from the bottom. We'll just go through what they had to say. So we just talked about fighter of the year. They've got Alex. We talked through why that one makes sense. The non-UFC men's fighter of the year, they have as Francis Ngannou. I thought that this was an interesting choice. Now, they're basing it a lot on his boxing career, in addition to his win that he just had in the PFL. What's your feeling on that?
It's a weird option. I mean, I'm not really too sure of other male fighters of the year outside of the UFC. Usyk probably would be my guy, I guess, because he just did some crazy stuff. But Francis is not a bad option. It is what it is. They got to pick somebody.
Well, I mean, if we're talking just non-UFC MMA, though, I mean,
I got you. Oh, my bad. Yeah, I mean, non-UFC MMA guys specifically. Listen, who do you have to choose from? Like Nate Diaz? Like, so
I mean, well, it's a little bit tough with that. I mean, I would say that a couple of the guys who won the PFL tournaments probably could be in that conversation, because that the PFL championship event was pretty decent when it came to the fights that were on it. A lot of those names are ones that don't immediately spring back to mind, so I'd have to go through the card to pick out ones that I thought were like cream of the crop. But that's just the unfortunate aspect of that they have so many Dagestani fighters, and they only are fighting guys in that promotion, so it's hard to they're not promoting themselves all that well outside of the bubble of the PFL, and you have to be within the PFL bubble to begin with to even have any frame of reference for that. So, I mean, if I was going to go outside of the UFC, I'd say it's like someone like Rod Tang would probably spring to mind. You know, a lot of the one championship guys would probably be among my choices.
Mike
That
Perry was somebody that came to my mind.
Sure. I mean, you know, again, bare knuckle boxing, so it's like
But he was
slightly different.
he was UFC, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But you know, again, we're talking MMA specifically. It's a little bit harder to quantify that. But and then even Mike Perry, you know, getting pieced up by Jake Paul is never a good
True,
look.
that
So
did happen, yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
this one's a
So
hard one for me.
yeah, fair enough. You know, I wish they had given some more like runners up and stuff. That would have
Yeah,
been nice to
yeah,
be able to sort
exactly.
through. So they have women's fighter of the year as Kayla Harrison. So I think that's a little bit more appropriate of a choice based on the conversation we were just having about the women's fighters. Yeah, you know, I think that over Zhang Weilei, I think that there's a strong case to be made for Kayla. So good for ESPN to have that as their choice.
Yeah, the
And then
non-UFC fighter, yeah, this one could be yep.
And you know, it really we're talking non-UFC women's fighter is Dakota Ditcheva, and I mean, I think that this just speaks to the strength of Dakota Ditcheva, like having the PFL on her back right now because I'm struggling. You know, I've watched a good amount of the PFL's season. I'm struggling to remember the male fighters. Dakota Ditcheva is really making a name for herself in that organization and beyond. So again, strength of the promotion and the backing that she's bringing to the sport, you know, in her capacity right now.
Yeah, 100%.
Their fight of the year was, of course, the BMF fight, Gaethje versus Holloway. Makes sense.
Yeah, there's some ones that I'm scrolling through here that I'm looking at because we don't really need to
Yeah,
touch
that's what
more
I'm saying. I
onto
don't know
them.
if
Yeah.
if we really wanted to like, you know, actually go into any of these. I mean, we really did kind of talk
And
through a lot of these. They have Dricus in Israel as submission of the year, which I kind of said, so that sort of makes more sense to me.
this one coming up after is best moment. That's an
Ah,
interesting category, and this one I can
yes.
definitely say is probably the best moment. Yeah, it was meme worthy, so I give it that. Yeah.
Well, and
Runner
you
up,
know,
I can actually give you.
yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean.
please go
I'll
ahead.
give you a runner up real quick. Marab kissing Sean's back. That was a fun one.
Well, yeah, and so, you know, I was going to expand it to just wildest moments of the year because I did have a couple of those in mind.
Bryce
And
Mitchell with the Bible.
Bryce Mitchell with the Bible would be a good one. That wasn't even one that was on the bingo card, so I like that. Thank you for that. My wildest moment of the year was Igor Severino biting Andre Lima. That was, I mean, I can't remember a bite to that extent, the way that it happened like that. There was one other one that had come up in the video that I made about it from years and years and years ago. But I mean, that was certainly wild indeed. And then also, how about Ian Gary getting his shorts ripped in the Shavkat fight?
So I'm glad you brought that one up because I think it's a good bridge for the moment that I want to bring up. But I do want to first bridge back to non-UFC fighter Muhammad Mokaev. I think is a good one to throw out there. He deserves it now that he's not in the UFC. Anyway, but
Wow.
him pulling shorts down of Manel is also a best moment kind of thing. Like that was a wild. Like, what are you doing, dude? You're trying to pants him. Like, so anyway,
Legit.
that
Yeah,
was good.
yeah, for sure. There have been some crazy moments indeed. I think that all of those are worthwhile.
I guess this is
Uh,
only well, actually, I actually think I have a good moment too. I
yeah,
don't.
sure.
This is obviously probably in ring only, in cage only, moments. But I think Yuri claiming Alex was using voodoo is one of the best moments of the year. Yeah,
Yeah, I can dig that. I mean, if we're going outside of the cage, I think that was it. I believe it was Manel Kopp. I think Manel Kopp throwing the most accurate water bottle shot of all time at Kai Kara France at the press conference where he was
yeah,
going after Izzy as well. I thought that was a pretty good one.
yep.
There have been
Dropping the f
some
bombs. That was
Oh, oh yeah, yeah. That was, yeah, the Australia card with multiple F slurs going on.
mhm,
That was certainly noteworthy. Charles Radke in that
yeah.
conversation as well. You know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other best moments, but I think we can go. That is actually a pretty good category thing. I wish we.
Yeah, I think
That's
for
a
like next year, if we start like actually like trying to keep track of some of these things, maybe we'll come back with like an actual like last week's fights presentation for this kind of
yeah,
show. But yeah, that we'll keep the show going, and hopefully we'll have a like an actual defined list for you.
100%. Moving on,
Yeah,
breakout fighter
breakout
Diego
fighter.
Lopez. I think that
Yeah,
one's warranted. I can't remember who had some other. What were the other options in the list where I think he could have been snubbed? Let me actually go back 1 second. Breakout star, yeah, Diego Lopez actually won the other poll as well. So consistency among the writers at ESPN and then the community. I think that's nice.
sure. And as I said, I think Zawal should be somewhat in that conversation. But
This one is
regardless,
crazy. This one's
yeah,
crazy.
this one certainly raised an eyebrow here, saying most improved fighter of the year is Dan Hooker.
And his face looks like that after Gamrot. Are you
Yeah.
serious right now? Like, what did he improve? He was getting beat up by Jalen Turner, and then he gets beat up by Gamrot. That's actually a decline, if anything. Like, Gamrot on the feet, like, dude, get up out of here.
Yeah, it's an odd I mean, yeah, it's an odd choice based
You
on
can't
like
even
what
explain it.
exactly.
Like,
Right.
it's like, bro, it's so crazy to think
Yeah,
that
cuz I
he
mean
was on
really
the list of people. Like, most
yeah,
improved, it's like, oh, Dan Hooker. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like,
that's what I mean. It's like I would say that he is the most consistent. Like if you're going to give him an award of some type, I'd say that
you
he's
know
the
what you're
most
going to get out of him. Like,
consistency. Yeah, he gets a consistency award for being a guy that can take a lot of damage and dish out, a decent amount himself. But I didn't see any like dramatic, leaps and bounds, stuff that like would set him apart as far as most improvements.
yeah.
I think that Josh Van has a better case to be most improved fighter as far as his ground game goes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other most improved that would definitely be. I mean, you got to think of people like I don't know. It's just crazy to me. I can't. This has just got me flustered. Not gonna lie. Like that's a crazy option to throw Dan Hooker in there. Whew.
Yeah, I'm really trying to like I'm trying to stretch a little bit here to think of other fighters that have made like leaps and bounds improvements. Um,
I mean, he got a new tattoo, an improvement, but it's
yeah, the quality of the chest piece is questionable when it comes to improvement status, I would say. In fact, if we're talking about tattoo improvements, Carlos Freitas takes that one hand over fist.
true. True that. Well, Igor Severino too. He got the tattoo of the bite mark. So
I
this
got
isn't a
fucking
tattoo
bit.
competition. Competition here. So either way.
Fair. All right. Well, let's keep chucking along here. So
I
yeah,
like
best
this.
newcomer.
I like
Yeah.
this because it's not specifying that they have to make their debut. This is just somebody
Right.
who's just like new to our eyes kind of deal. So I like Carlos Freitas being here. Jean Silva, obviously, any of the fighting nerds can be up there, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and that goes into
Yeah,
the
there
next
you go.
category here, team and coach of the year of the Fighting Nerds. I mean, we've talked about it time and time again, and it bears repeating. The Fighting Nerds. This has been the year of the Fighting Nerds for sure. It's funny in that regard because really, I mean, we've touched on a couple of them throughout these conversations, but we haven't really zeroed in on the fact that like all just that speaks to how the quality of the year has been overall. There's been a lot of great fights and a lot of great fighters, but like if you want to talk about team consistency, the Fighting Nerds, this is the year of the Fighting Nerds for sure.
I want to make this point that I don't think ESPN or whoever wrote this actually watched the Jean Silva fight because they wrote most recently putting Drew Dober's lights out. I don't think that's how that ended. It ended with Jean Silva pointing at the cut and the doctor stepping in. I'm pretty sure.
All right, fair enough.
But either way, that's just a nitpick here.
Yeah, so
So,
going through some of the other guys on there, I mean, Kaio with the performance we had mentioned with Jared Cannonier, that was a huge step
mhm.
up and a huge test for him that he passed with flying colors. We talked about Mauricio Hufi when his last fight. We had said we kind of called the way that we thought that might go, where it's like Hufi is I think a little bit of the wild card, so to speak. Having Joe Rogan say that he thought that Hoopy was like the star of the Fighting Nerds, that's you want to talk about wild moments in the sport of the year. I'd say that could certainly be in that conversation. But I'd say that of the breakout nerds this year, Hoofy is still kind of the one where it's like, what's it really going to look like as he continues to ascend? But, Kaio and Gene Silva for sure at the top of the list, making some amazing, tremendous strides in their careers this year.
Yeah, 100%.
And you see those fighting nerds glasses all the time now, so you know what that
True.
means.
Yep.
Best card, we talked about 300. We've talked about all the amazing cards this year, so we can kind of go through that. And that actually does round out their list. So
Good
that's
deal.
what ESPN has to say about it. And then to finish off the lists that we have on deck as far as best ofs and awards and whatnot for the year, we wanted to touch on the World MMA Awards. Now, this is kind of a different one. The criteria is a little bit different, so keep in mind that when we go through some of these, the window for consideration for this is not on the year. It actually is from July 1st of 2023 to June 30th of 2024.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, it's an odd time frame that they've kind of boxed this in. I don't know why they do that. I have firsthand experience.
To have Josh Van have a full cycle in the year, that's
Bingo.
really what
That's
it
a good
is.
answer. But knowing that, like, I have some experience with awards and entry windows and stuff like that, I am well acquainted with the fact that different competitions just do them differently, seemingly at random. So it's a little bit odd that they chose to structure it this way. But the point is that is how they chose to. So just keep that in mind. But going through some of the notable ones here, Lifetime Achievement Award for Mark Coleman. Abso-fucking-lutely. There has never been a more deserving Lifetime Achievement Award in the history of these awards, I would say. Mark Coleman, who has been through hell this year as a legend of the sport. If you are not aware, Mark Coleman, of course, had some terrible circumstances in his life with a tragic house fire where he was a hero, saving the lives of several of his family members and unfortunately losing his dog in the process. So terrible circumstances there. He was hospitalized, I believe, multiple times this year because of that, smoke inhalation and things like that. So what a warrior Mark Coleman is. And having had the opportunity and being as privileged as I was to have met him at UFC Tampa, I have to say, throughout all that he has been through, and on top of being a legend of the sport, also just a very genuine and sweet person who is willing to take the time to shake a fan's hand when they wanted to, take a picture and all that kind of stuff. So far and away, Lifetime Achievement Award to Mark Coleman is beyond deserved. Sorry,
Hell yeah.
I didn't
To
mean to
hear.
monopolize all
No,
of that,
yeah.
but that was a lot to,
Good.
a
That's a
lot to
good
go
wrap.
through.
That was a good segment of it. Yeah, I appreciate it. Let's
Sure.
see.
Fighter of the year, they have Alex. We talked about that a little bit. Female Fighter of the Year, again, Zhang Weilei. This is the one that I thought we were going to be talking about at first. I didn't realize that the MMA Orbit poll had that as well. So we kind of went through our thoughts on that. A little bit strange, but they had one of their choices on here was Larissa Pacheco, which I thought was an interesting inclusion there. She did not win her fight against Chris Cyborg. I think that Chris Cyborg might have been a good choice for that very reason. Larissa Pacheco was a longtime foe of Kayla Harrison, and I believe the last person to beat Kayla Harrison. So just an interesting note when it comes to that.
Well, I mean, Raquel Pennington is a pretty crazy name to be on any list, but if you consider the timeline, sure, didn't she just win the belt? Like, whatevs.
Yeah, and actually, if we're going through some of their choices here, let's backtrack real quick to the male fighter of the year choices.
Oh, Pantoja.
Yeah, because I was going to say there were some interesting choices on here. I didn't mean to gloss over that. So yeah, Pantoja on their list, and then Renan Ferreira on their list. How exactly? I mean, granted, he had been running through a couple of guys, in the PFL, but I mean, he got soundly defeated by Francis Ngannou. So that's just an odd inclusion to me.
That wouldn't have happened yet, I don't think.
Oh, right. Yes.
Come on
I go
now.
through that whole thing of saying when the window was, and I don't even remember it myself. So okay, yes, maybe it does make more sense in that capacity. Sure, my bad. You are correct, Chase.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So
keeping me on point.
same thing with Raquel. She would have been champ at the time, reigning for the whole year.
Yeah, and then I guess that makes more sense for Larissa Pacheco as well. So,
Yeah, okay.
all right, egg on my face yet again. Put it on the fail compilation. But yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
even within that capacity, you still think Raquel Pennington kind of a little bit. I mean, with the fight with Myra Bueno Silva was good.
In that timeline, you could have had Alexa Grasso. So,
Yeah, right. Good
I
point. Good
mean,
point. So
whatevs.
yeah, whatevs indeed. So breakthrough fighter of the year for their list. They had a couple of interesting ones. Anatoly Malakin was I believe that's that's one championship. He had been racking up some good wins, so I think that that's a deserved inclusion there. And I do appreciate. I think that that's also something just to note in general on here is that I do appreciate that they are going out of their way to be inclusive of other organizations. So it's not just all UFC because that's the organization that everybody knows and watches the most.
Yeah.
So shout out to them for that.
Yeah, Benoit's kind of a crazy choice because right around this time, I mean, even if you go back, he would have still been knocked out by DP, I think.
Is that in that window is a good question. I don't remember exactly when that
I
event
mean,
would have been
well,
in
if you
comparison to this.
I think if you go back to June and just a year ago from like just go back a year from June, I think is what the window was, or July and go back a year. I think Dustin Poirier still would have beat Benoit at that time, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
Sure. I mean, at least ascending to the ranks of being able to have that fight not be completely out of the question, I guess, makes a little bit of sense there.
Ian Gary's a pretty good choice,
Yeah,
giving the extension to him. Honestly, I'm surprised we didn't see more of him in the other polls. So
sure. Yeah, I mean, he did have some pretty good wins that would have made sense for that. Their breakthrough fighter of the year was Tom Aspinall, which I mean, even based on the time frame, does seem to make a good amount of sense. He would have been coming off of the injury, coming back and showing that he was just as fresh, just as game. So I'm not mad at that.
true.
All
Yeah,
right, moving
he
on.
would have
Oh,
won
sorry.
interim, and no, yeah, he would have just won the interim, and he would have just been holding it for that amount of in that window kind of deal.
For sure, for sure. So yeah, moving on. They have, which is this is also very strange to me that they have it broken out as international fighter of the year. When I mean, if we're talking about national versus international, I don't know how they're quantifying that. If Tom Aspinall is your, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, is
so
he also on that list?
where's the national for Forbes? Like
Right.
what's that's is it the USA? So this is excluding the Americas or like Canada? Like where, who knows? So
Well, and
international is
also
kind of
to
funny.
yeah, and to be clear, the MMA Awards is its own body. This is just Forbes reporting on it, so I just didn't want to have those be equated. But
True.
um, yeah, but so for the MMA Awards, yeah, like what are you exactly basing that on? If you've got this entire list is international on the breakout
True.
fighters,
Yeah, I mean I guess those are well, Diego, that's nowhere near, England or Ireland or France kind of deal. I don't know.
yeah, how far national are we going slash international? I guess it's like they're looking at hemispheres perhaps, but then Ilya Taporia is on there,
Yeah,
which that
Ilya, Jack, Zhang Wei Li, Suzuki. I'm sure that's somewhere in Asia.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, well yeah. Shihiro Suzuki is a Ryzen guy. I had looked a little bit into him.
So
Um,
where's Kai then? What the heck? He would have been
right.
balling at this time, wouldn't he?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, most definitely. So yeah, these choices just seem a little bit odd. You got Ilya, of course, making sense, and Jack Della. Even Jack Della does seem a little odd to me. I want to at least put this out there because I don't know if I've said it on the show before, but I I believe that the amount of glazing slash hype around Jack Della Maddalena is going to be taken down a peg in this coming year upon his return. I'm not a hater. I think that Jack Della is a fine fighter. I just, based on the performances that we've seen, now you have the fight that, is in the running for comeback of the year, which, I think Chase gave to was him versus Gilbert Burns. Which I think I also kind of said was made sense for that as the with that criteria, but that is a fight that he was down a good amount, and then the fight before that was against Kevin Holland, which is a fight that it might be somewhat of a spicy take, but I stand by it that I think that might have been a slight robbery there.
Yeah,
So
I kind of agreed on that night of that one too.
Exactly. So I'm just saying, it's not a hate thing. It's just looking at what I'm seeing. I see a lot of support for Jack Della, and I want to be on the train with all of you guys as well when it comes to that. But I'm calling it how I see it here and now. I think that the Jack Della hype might die. It's either going to go one or the other way. It's either going to go very, very far down. It's going to be completely wiped out, or it's going to be like, oh wow, he really is the breakout guy. But I don't see it going
Yeah,
that way.
100%. I agree.
So yeah, and then the last one on their international list was Zhang Weili, and again, she had fought twice within that window, I believe. So
Yeah,
just
but one of
seems
them was
odd.
pure. I mean, both of them, in a sense, were pure domination. So, and to make the list up there with male fighters, that's pretty big, honestly.
Sure, I can fuck with that. Uh, all right, their fight of the year was Max and Justin. We've talked about that a whole
Well,
bunch, but
the thing that I want to mention is that Dustin and Benoit was definitely in the window if they were fight of the year.
oh, good,
But
good
why
point.
was that fight of the
Yeah,
year? And in my opinion, like why would that be nominated? That wasn't really the fight of the year, in my opinion. I mean, Dustin kind of just smoked him.
yeah,
Like the first round was competitive. I think Benoit was winning, but the second round started and it was over before you knew it, kind of
sure.
deal. So
And they've got Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Moreno. Would that have been three?
that
That
was a
was
good
three, I
one.
guess.
That was
Oh, the
the
second
second
one.
one.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So, was
Or
that three? I think that might have been three, right? No.
it might have been. I think, yeah, if there was
Yeah, I
three, it
think
would have
I think
been,
it's got to be three.
yeah,
So
the
yeah,
decision.
yeah, yeah. And that was a fantastic fight, so that certainly deserves some recognition there. And then also Dan Hooker versus
Hooker and
yeah, that was a
Turner.
great, great fight. So I actually I do kind of like this list. Clay Collard versus Shane Burgos being on this list is a little ridiculous to me, and that's not uh, organization bias, but I watched a lot of that season, and not if if we're being generous to other organizations, then okay, you want to just have something from somewhere else in there, then perhaps, but probably even still better choices from outside of the UFC than that one. Just my
100%.
opinion.
Yeah.
All right, knockout of the year they're given to Max in the BMF fight. We've talked about that a whole bunch, but a
Bryce and
couple,
Josh
yeah,
Emmett. Oof, that was a crazy one.
one of the best. That's another one where you want to talk about sending someone to the
Yeah,
shadow
true.
realm. Yeah, that certainly is in the running on that one. Gaethje and
Justin and
Poirier.
Dustin.
Yeah, yeah, that was certainly one that was unexpected. At least, I mean, I
True.
don't think anybody would have thought that the head kick, especially a blocked head kick, that always
True.
is what kills me about that one, man. The fact that like it wasn't even a clean head kick that did it, just kind of wild.
Yeah. And then
Um,
Oliveira and Sopaj is another great one. I'm love to see it on the list because it was crazy.
Yeah,
You know.
for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm glad that you gave that its praise early because it definitely deserves it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know about this Levi Cariel versus Matthew, and I don't even know.
Rakatundra. Yeah, that one's tough. I'm sorry,
Yeah, I
man.
was gonna say thanks for the attempt, but I guess maybe we should go back and watch that one. That was a head kick knockout at Brave CF 74. So. Uh,
Mokayev's home.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, the new home of Muhammad Mokaev. So, maybe that's one worth going back and checking out in your leisure time while we're waiting for fights to start back up.
True.
All right, submission of the year: the triangle armbar by Diego Lopez over Gavin Tucker. Certainly one that deserves to be in that conversation. That would have been within that window.
Volkov and Tai Tuivasa was I think, submission of the year for this period. I think that's a good option because not only obviously Tai Tuivasa's submission defense is horrible, but it's the level of difficulty that submission takes, and that he was able to actually pull it off in the UFC. Might have been one of
Yeah,
the only ones.
literally, yeah. I was gonna say, I think on the episode that I did about that event, I said, pulling off an Ezekiel choke is not something you see every day. So good stuff there for sure. And the Ortega versus Rodriguez fight that we had talked about. I mean, the finish was certainly great and a nice inclusion, but just that as a comeback, that certainly deserves to be in the conversation for sure.
I don't know. Submission of the year for Brian and Yair. I mean, it's another one with Tai Tuivasa kind of deal. It's like their submission defense is not really that great. So subbing them whatever. But the best part about Brian Ortega, Yair Rodriguez, is Brian not letting the choke go, letting his fellow Mexican gurgle and choke, and it was good. No Diddy. So I can't wait. It was a good
Fair.
one.
But another one on this list that definitely deserves some praise is Damon Blackshear over Jose Johnson, the Twister, one of
Hmm.
I think three now, maybe or three or two. I think he's in rarefied air with the Twister submission. So shout out to Damon Blackshear, who's just a really great wrestler in general and deserves to continue to be on the radar for people, because I think that he's got potential to continue to go and do great things.
Yeah, and then the last one on the list is Islam and Dustin. Again, I don't know if I put this on submission of the year because it's something that we kind of thought was going to happen. Like he should sub Dustin, but
Right,
it is
right.
what it is.
For sure. And then now, so we had kind of touched on this a little bit. So their comeback of the year is the one that is a little bit wonky, where they have both the comeback within the capacity of a fight, and then also the comeback to the sport rolled into one. So their winner was Tom Aspinall, which, if you're looking at the comeback to the sport aspect of it, I guess makes somewhat of sense. Had been injured, came back again, proved that he was still everything that people thought that he could be. So, his other competition in that regard would have been Jose Aldo, who at the time was looking pretty goddamn fresh in his comeback fight for sure. So, good choice there, I guess. But then it's like you're rolling that in with actual full on fights. So it's just an odd kind of combination of all of the factors on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Jose Aldo career. Like that's just really funny.
Right.
Just what does that even mean in this? So and then you have the other fights. It's like Elvis Brenner and Guram. It's like, why is that even here? I mean,
Oh,
come
no,
back.
no, no, that should be here. Yes, no, that's the one that Elvis Brenner got cut open and was bleeding like a pint of blood.
But what's
Yeah.
the comeback version? Like he came back and won. Okay,
Oh,
so
yeah.
that was okay. I thought with these other ones, I'm thinking like, did Elvis Brenner come back from injury or like what
Oh,
was
no, well,
the?
no, that's the point, though, is what I was getting at,
Yeah,
is that, like, they're rolling in two things. They're conflating two things that really need to, they even say it here, like, this category needs to be split into two. And it does, because it's like you have come back to the sport and then come back within a fight. So it's
yeah,
like,
I get you.
yeah, within a fight, Elvis Brenner versus Kutateladze makes a lot of sense. I mean, that was the fight that really got me high on the Elvis Brenner train there, that got sadly taken down by Joel Alvarez not
Yeah,
too far after that.
and
But yeah.
well, and so going with this timeline, reaching back, I do remember watching this Rodolfo Bellato and Ihor Potiera fight, and it is the actual reason that I have hope in Potiera because he beat the shit out of Bellato, like for two, for a round and a half, whatever, he had to win. Of course, actually, I think he finished him, so he might have been beating him for 2 rounds. And that Bellato dude just would not go down. Like he fell, but he just like wouldn't go out. The ref wouldn't end it. And then it was one of those situations where Bellato got on top and then the ref kind of ended it a little early, like kind of deal. So I always had hope in Ihor, like he can put people out kind of deal. But so that was a great fight. Comeback of the year. I do maybe agree, but like I said, the ref kind of he definitely had an earpiece in on that fight. Like he didn't want to end it for Ihor, but as soon as Ihor got in trouble, he was diving on him. Like it was pissing me off. So
Sure, sure. So, an odd combination type list, but I don't think terrible choices on it.
yeah.
Upset of the year, they're saying Sean Strickland over Israel Adesanya. I would say that absolutely
Yeah.
tracks. That was one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport, I would say, at the time. So, obviously Israel Adesanya in context now is a little bit different, but at the time, shout out to Israel Adesanya for still remaining as active as he was at that time, because that was the whole thing, was that it was supposed to be Dricus. They had set the whole Dricus fight up with their little in-ring confrontation. My African brother, what's up, my anyway. And then that didn't end up happening. It didn't go. The fight did not end up happening. Israel Adesanya still wanted to stay active and took the Strickland fight. I give him a lot of props for that. Unfortunately, it didn't go his way, and then it would become one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, actually, not even just upset of the year, but it really just it threw off the rest of Adesanya's career. So like, it really upset his upset of the career right there is this fight right here. So
Yeah, you make a good point because it certainly did change his trajectory thereafter. Other options on here, Dricus versus Rob Whitaker. Yeah, I mean, I think that at the time, again, a lot of people, this was really the point in Dricus's career that he still is to a certain extent. He's just one of those guys that just gets consistently counted out, like on the reg. I mean, like, and
yeah,
it was certainly apparent here because everybody was seeing him do his thing leading up. This was also just after the nose surgery, so he back in the day, if you recall, before he had his septum surgery or whatever, he used to have his mouth wide open a lot, breathed very heavily during fights and whatnot. So that was a big tell that people thought he was getting gassed early and stuff. There was a lot of people thinking that Dricus was flash in the pan kind of guy, wasn't really cut from the same cloth as some of these other guys. I would say that Dricus versus Rob is a good inclusion on this list.
yeah, 100%, especially with the timeline. I mean, you have Neil Magny and Mike Malott being in this timeline. We talked about it. It's not an upset in our opinion because Mike Malott, we just know, is not that great. So whatever. Ovin
But
St. Preux, or go ahead.
in
Yeah,
hindsight, so no,
yeah,
only and I'm
yeah,
just going to add in hindsight now is only that note. At the time, Mike Malott was undefeated too.
true. And another one that I think is weird because I don't really remember this fight, and I think of like, oh my god, this was a huge upset. Was OSP and Kennedy? Like that could just blow right off my radar. So I don't know why it's on the list, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'd have to go back and rewatch that one because it's not one that stuck out in my brain either. But I did see Anakin throw it in the chat earlier, so
Hmm,
probably something to revisit on that one.
100%.
Uh, yeah. All right. So now getting out of the categories that we've already covered in other lists here, we've got some categories that are unique to the MMA awards. And these get a little bit weird because there's only so many people to choose from in some of these. So we're talking about things like this one here. This is commentator of the year, and it went to John Anik, which is perfectly fine because John Anik is the fucking man. Much love for John Anik. But your other nominees were Brendan Fitzgerald, John Gooden, Laura Sanko, and Sean O'Connell. I mean, I think that it's like your pool is always going to be somewhat in the same realm unless there's some like breakout star in the commentary world, right? I mean, like,
Nah, I mean, I'm looking at this list and I think commentator of the year and John Anik wins. I'm like, okay. And then I see Brendan Fitzgerald. It's like Laura Sanko. I'm like, okay, well, where's Bisping? And then if I have
sure.
Sean O'Connell and John Gooden, where's Dean Thomas? Okay, if we're just throwing in people, where are these guys? I don't know. Michael Bisping, I think they have him in the next one as analyst of the year, so I guess they classify them different. But Laura Sanko's just as much of a commentator as Michael Bisping. DC, you could even throw him in there because he does the post or the weigh-in shows. Like, I
Well,
mean, he's commentary
and
making
I
something.
but I also think that gets to the point of what I'm trying to say here is that like it's like if you have these people that are just staples of this field, it's like it's going to be kind of a somewhat of a revolving door. I would think it's like if DC is not nominated this year, then either the year before or the year after, I would think he's going to be in the
Yeah,
conversation, and it's just going to keep swirling through some of these same people. So yeah, Senko being included in there, I think that she makes a strong case. She's a person who worked very, very hard to get to the position that she's in now, and I think she does just fucking fine. So I think that if not this year, then it would be very much warranted coming up for her.
yeah. So going into the next one, analyst of the year, like I just said,
Mhm.
Michael Bisping was the winner. Dean Thomas made his name onto the list. I didn't even see that. Shout out him. Listen, I brought his name up, and I'm glad other people knew that he's real. Dan Hardy, I disagree. 100%. This dude needs to not be on the analyst of the year list because I listened to him and it's just not good. It's not fun to listen to. Paul Felder, another fun one. But if you're going to have him, you got to have Dom in there probably because I think him and Paul Felder are like on evil, even in my book. And then I don't know the last guy, Saif Saeed.
Yeah, Saif Saad. I don't know what promotion he does
He
analysis
must be
for.
good as fuck though. We might have to go tune in. Like shit.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I appreciate that they go outside of just the UFC. So it's like there are a lot of other organizations with some really, really talented people in them that deserve these recognitions. So that
Yeah,
speaks to just there not being enough hours in the day to consume every single piece of MMA content on the planet. But support the show. Maybe we'll get to that point. you know.
100%.
But yeah, and again, I think that this is another one basically the same comment that I made from the last category applies here. That it's like if you're, if you don't see Dom this year, then look 1 year back or look 1 year
Yeah,
forward.
100%.
Moving on though to coach of the year, they have Plinio Cruz as the winner. Of course, that's Alex Pereira's coach. Some decent competition here, at least in the sense of Eric Nixick being in there. That's a dude who I think is one of the best coaches on the planet. So I like seeing his inclusion. Tim Welch within this window kind of makes
Yeah, I
sense
was
as
just
well,
gonna
I
say
guess,
it
right?
has to be within this window because it kind
All
of
right.
fell off after he lost to, Marab or whatever, but
Well, even
that's a good
within the,
choice.
the loss to Rob, right? I mean, like the coaching that he was doing between rounds was questionable to
Yeah.
some people.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know who the coach is for the Fighting Nerds, but he needs to be in here. Maybe he is. I just don't know his name. Francisco Grasso, is this Alexa Grasso's relation, or is that
I
no?
don't think so.
Yeah, I didn't think so. But and then Marcos Parumpa Damana. Okay, yeah, I don't know these guys, so they might be good though.
Yeah, and we got to, this is stuff that we can expand our horizons on a little bit more and maybe become a little bit more educated on over time.
Yeah,
But we can only go with what information we have at the moment.
and then this next one we might not know too much about really. So trainer of the year, couldn't really
Yeah,
give too much insight.
yeah, it's a good point. I mean, this kind of goes a little bit deeper into like these are like the type of awards when it comes to like trainer of the year that I think is more specific to the fighters themselves than like people at our level would be really aware of. So, shout out to all of these people who I'm sure are all very important to the people that they train, but it would be outside of the purview of what we would be aware of, I think.
Yeah,
Gym
gym
of
of the
the
year.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like we've made that pretty clear with how many times we've said that the Fighting Nerds can be on all of these lists, but you know,
Yeah, as they say in the article here, that
yeah,
fighting nerds being a no-brainer is exactly that. So
yep,
all of these guys, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like you kind of put him in his own category to an extent, but it's like Carlos Praetis, also a fighting nerd, like
yeah,
so it's just a powerhouse right now going on over there. And again, same criticism of these other categories yet again, because you've got AKA, you
American
got
Top Team.
yeah, American Top Team. I mean, like Extreme Couture. These are all gyms that you could certainly see either the year before or the year after. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a small world to an extent when it comes to MMA, but that should also be a signal to some of these other gyms that it's your time to go make a name for yourself, become the next fighting nerds.
100%. Yeah, you can be
Yeah,
shot right to the top if you do it right.
exactly. Graduate some guys. Really, what about who was it? Geez, there's no way I'm going to be able to remember this off the top of my head. But we were talking about it on the show not too long ago. That Mile High Militia. It
Hmm.
was out in Colorado. Couple guys who defected from one gym and went over and started their own
Yes,
thing.
yes, I
Yeah,
remember. I don't
yeah,
remember much about it, but I know what you're talking about. Yes.
right. So yeah, we'd have to go back into the show archives and figure out which people were all involved in that. But the reason I bring that up is to say that like something like that could very well become their own breakouts if they play their cards right.
Exactly.
So yeah, moving on. Referee of the year, Herb Dean. This is another one where it's like, how do you have an entire category for this? How many times has Herb Dean won this over the years? Would be a
Yeah.
great question.
Yeah, and there's such a small pool to pick from. I mean, like you said, it's going to be Keith Peterson next year, maybe something.
Well, hopefully not, considering he's been screwing up a good amount lately. But
Well, and this would have been in a window where Mark Goddard was screwing up, Sugar Sean and Aljo. So
yeah,
they all have their own issues, especially if you just, in hindsight, we can make a list of whenever they fuck up in a
sure, right,
whole
and
year. Like,
yeah, and also right. And I mean, it's of course, if you're going to go fight by fight with these referees, you're being a little bit hypercritical, I would say, because of how tough of a job it is. So a little bit of leeway there as well, but all fine choices. Mark Goddard, Jason Herzog, Mark Smith,
yeah.
and Keith Peterson. I mean, these are household names as far as the refereeing game goes. If you follow this sport, so all fine. We
Ring
go down.
girl, hey,
Yeah.
I can tell you she's a good winner. She's a good one, I'll tell you that.
What about that one, this is outside of the MMA window, but, what about that one ring girl from the Tyson fight that was getting all that
Oh,
attention?
I didn't get to it, no?
Oh, really? Oh, you didn't yeah,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, I'd have to it'd be a little tough for me,
This was Mike Tyson or this was
yeah, the
Fury?
Mike Tyson,
Okay, okay.
yeah, it's a Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. Ring girl, hold on, let me see if I can pull this up just as a little bit of an aside
I'll give you
here.
my honorable mention while you look that up.
Sure.
My ring girl out in China,
Oh,
she was
yes.
she definitely could have won, and even though we've only seen her once, we may never see her again. I will remember her. She looked very nice. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah. So this is Sydney Thomas is the name of that young lady who was kind of stole the show to a lot of people at the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. But again, just a little bit of an aside, not MMA
Yeah.
related.
I do remember making comments about how all the women at the event have just the biggest tits ever, but, it is what it is.
For sure. They were also pushing them up to as high
Yeah.
as they could possibly go on the human body.
Yep.
But fine options as well. Got to see the lovely Brooklyn Wren in real life in Tampa, and let me tell you something, guys. What you see on the television does not hold a candle to what you see in real life. She is just very lovely. We'll keep it respectful here, but
Good
good
deal.
lord, yeah,
Hell yeah.
very nice on the eyes. Leading man goes to Dana White again. How many times has he won this, and how many times will he continue to win this? Your other options are somewhat limited, but I mean, I would actually give Ed Suarez a little bit of a shout out for LFA because LFA does graduate a lot of great fighters that end up coming into the UFC. So LFA has been a long time organization that has been graduating a lot of great fighters in that way. So there should be some recognition for LFA there.
I actually will give recognition here and I know it's outside the window that this would maybe necessarily apply, but the dude who's running Karate Combat might be on to
Yeah,
something.
for sure. Yeah, Karate Combat's doing some nice things as well. I think that's a good one. And Peter Murray being included on this for PFL is a little bit wild to me. Just
Best
saying.
promotion, of course. Yeah, we knew this was coming. Same options as the
No.
other article too. So,
Yeah,
which we
UFC
didn't
wins
I
it, of
don't know what
course.
Octagon is. Why is the leading man not on the list for this one too? Like,
Yeah, Octagon is one that I have heard a couple of times come up at. I believe don't quote me on this, but I want to say something like Poland. I think it might be a Polish organization. That sounds like in my mind it makes sense, but I could be wrong about that.
yeah.
But this really also goes to show just how many other organizations there are out there. How much it's like if you want to follow every single thing in this sport, it's like next to impossible. So
Yeah.
we're limited by the amount of time that we can put into it as human beings and the reach that all of these organizations have. But Octagon, LFA, KSW, and PFL were your other choices, and UFC wins.
Good deal.
Yeah, and last but not least here, I guess this is one that actually we could probably have a little bit to say about because I did see some conversation about it in the Discord. The Personality of the Year award for the MMA Awards went to Nina Marie Danielle, Nina Drama. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I mean, it's probably the only option that you could have, especially in the window. She was popping off. Like, I don't know if you guys know, but she was on an episode of Ridiculousness. Like, she's kind of like more than just a TikTok kind of person now. So she's actually got some opportunities ahead of her, and she does work with the UFC. So her being on this list doesn't surprise me. But the other ones on the list, kind of interesting. Why Bruce Buffer? Maybe because he does cameo work and he's kind of on social media a little bit. Chael Sonnen, okay, his YouTube channel is a little polarizing at times. He does say some outlandish stuff, and he does come on the shows dressed in all black, like he does have like some aura to him. It is Uncle Chael. Joe Rogan, also another one where you got a show that you can just listen to him babble and whatever. Daniel Cormier, though, that is an interesting personality of the year because Other than, I mean, he does have his own show. Actually, he does have the Ryan Clark show, doesn't he? Or no, it's actually with Chael now. Sorry,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, he's got the show with Chael, and he also does have his own YouTube channel as well. So, I mean, he is
true.
making a lot
Oh,
of
true.
content.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess they all apply, but I don't know. Daniel Cormier just doesn't seem like the. When I think of personality, I think he just has, other than Bruce. Like I don't know because I just don't know much about Bruce. Like the least amount of personality from this list, and Nina, maybe I would say that too. But whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the big omission here to a lot of people, and I mean, if we're talking about within the window, maybe there's something there, but I think it's more political than that, is the MMA guru.
Yeah,
I think that it makes a lot of sense to include the MMA guru. I mean, love him or hate him, he is very influential, and I think love him or hate him is exactly why he is warranted on a list like this. He is a polarizing figure in the sport that drives a lot of attention, and he's a hardworking creator. So if he's not included now, it would be, I think, very unfortunate if, for political reasons, he is not included at some point in the future. And again, I'm not even a huge fan myself. I don't consume a lot of his content. I think he says some very off base things a lot of times just for the sake of being outlandish. And even sometimes if he does have those opinions, then he is an asshole.
I
Flat out. But you can't
yeah.
knock the hustle. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what is also crucial to note about your point and to add to it is at this time in this window, this would have been after Renato Moicano called him out in the post-fight speech.
That's a good
So
point.
the fact that he's not on this list is kind of crazy that they had to be like, well, Daniel Cormier can do, like, whatever. So they didn't actually get, some lower level personalities. And I know you're not going to get some underground content creators, but like Guru's not that. So
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. So, I think that you should be seeing him on a list like this at some point in the future, and they would be remiss to leave him off.
Yeah.
But all right. And best
Yeah.
MMA programming. I guess this is just, I guess, shows in general. They gave it to the
Yeah.
Contender Series, which, I
MMA
mean,
Hour.
well, that's the
Isn't
thing.
that
It's like that. That's why it's weird that the Contender Series would win that, because it's like, if you're basing it on, like, because obviously the Contender Series is like actual fights, but like these
yeah.
other shows that are on here, you've got Morning Combat, Luke
UFC
Thomas's show.
embedded the vlog series? Like,
Yeah, I mean, Anakin and Florian's podcast. I guess this is the category that last week's fights is going to eventually be on. So make sure you're getting your votes in early for last week's fights being included on the best MMA programming, category for the MMA Awards in the
there
future.
you
Because,
go. I'm excited
yeah,
for it. But hey, we might have to check out Morning Combat. Listen, that
oh
kind of
yeah,
sounds
sure.
nice.
That's I believe that's Luke Thomas's show.
Oh, I thought this was actually like a fight show. Damn, never
No,
mind.
no, just another podcast.
Well then, contender. Why'd you even? If you're gonna add 4 podcasts, why'd you add three podcasts and a vlog series? Why'd you add contender series? You
That
motherfuckers.
right. That's my point. Is it's like it's yeah. Obviously, the Contender Series is going to win when you have a show with fights on it.
Yeah,
like,
like, I mean, a more better, I mean, okay, excluding the window, if you woulda had the tough, right, you could have tough on there if you're not gonna have podcasts, or you could have that rip off Hamzat and Armin tough thing, like, you could do some fun stuff, like,
let's go, man. We should try to see if we can find some actual episodes of that translated. That would be fun to, like, actually see if we can rustle up somewhere just to see what it's like.
yeah, I agree, that would be dope.
Yeah, yeah. Any of our international viewers out there, if you have access to that and can find a way to get that at least with subtitles, that'd be a fun thing to watch along with. And
True.
who knows if the international copyright police will come after us for that one? But I'd watch it on stream if we had the ability to.
Yeah.
And then, MMA media source of the year, ESPN gets it over MMA Fighting, SureDog, MMA Junkie, and the Mac Life. These are all legacy brands at this point, so fine, I guess.
Yeah,
ESPN
I
getting it
can
is,
get with it. I use
yeah,
ESPN every time I'm watching the fights, it's got the live
yeah.
stats, so
And in context, I guess it's going to be somewhat interesting to see if ESPN stays as the outlet of record when it comes to airing the fights. There's talks of the contract with ESPN being, coming to its end at some point in the near future, and where the UFC is going to take their programming, if they're going to keep it on one network, or if they're going to have it split up into multiples, or if they're going to start their own thing. So, for right now, I think ESPN does a pretty decent job. ESPN Plus, however, is a little bit iffy at times. Just saying.
I think, when I'm thinking of media sources and I'm looking at these and, what I get from ESPN, and I'm thinking in the future, at least excluding the window, I feel like a media source, not just for MMA, but for all sports, is going to be these gambling apps, man. Like that you can look at anything on there, and eventually they're going to have everything you need to formulate your bets. Why wouldn't they have the stats? They already have the live stats. Why wouldn't they have, anything that ESPN or these other places don't have, like already, So
That's a very astute observation, actually. I mean, with the amount of money that organizations like Stake are bringing in, and the amount of
DraftKings, FanDuel,
all of it, exactly, and the involvement that they already have in the sport, and especially when it comes to Stake, having involvement in the broadcast space to an extent as well, being the primary backers of Kick, you could very well see an entire organization coming out of something like that at some point in the future. So, I mean, Chase is making a lot of sense with a forecast like that.
Yeah, I can see it happening, man.
And then Journalist of the Year went to Helwani. Okay.
Yeah.
Bronstetter, Oscar Willis, Carlos Contreras, Legaspi, and Nolan King.
Sure.
Not too much. Yeah, exactly. It's, I mean, like when it comes to MMA coverage, it's like Ariel winning anything is going to make sense. And then all these other people, I'm sure, do fine work.
What's the first sentence mean on that? It's fitting that he's Canadian, and then it just goes on to not say anything
Yeah.
about why
Yeah.
it's fitting.
Good point. I don't know. Why is that? That is an interesting thing to have as the introduction to that. Yeah, it's fitting that he's Canadian. Moving on.
Yep.
No, yeah, I don't know why. That is an odd little non sequitur.
Yep,
Um,
and it's funny to end on that too. Like that, we got one more award, and it's like, all right, well, we're done. He's Canadian. We're good. Wrap it up.
yeah, pretty much. But then, yeah, and then I mean, the Fighting Spirit Award they also gave to Mark Coleman for the same reasons that I had laid out earlier.
Leon
So,
Edwards, distinguishing mental antics by what?
yeah. So I guess that this is an interesting category here. I guess that they're
Oh
saying,
my lord,
this is like a little bit subjective, perhaps. But let's actually read through these. I didn't see the way
Leon,
that they were
composure
breaking that
against
down.
Colby. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that.
Gabriel Braga having a heart, the strength to overcome the loss of his father and his coach. Okay, fair. I mean, I would actually say that Anthony Smith, to an extent, going out there and fighting through what he was fighting through in his last fight, even though that's not within this window, but just along the same lines, I'm saying. But yeah, Leon Edwards. I think if we're going with composure, then perhaps Sean Strickland, even though he sort of lost his composure, but still, was able to hold it together in the fight itself with Dricus. I guess that kind of makes sense. Jim Miller gets an endurance nod, the only fighter to compete at UFC 100, 200, and 300. I think that would have been a fine award to actually give out. Of course, Mark Coleman, for the reasons we talked about earlier, makes sense, but that is quite an accomplishment for Jim Miller. So nice to see him get a nod there.
Yeah.
And Thomas Paul, who I'm not familiar with, but he gets a nod for his resilience for successfully competing in MMA despite being deaf. Matt Hamill would also have something to say about that one, but it's been a while since he's competed. So,
Mm.
fair enough. I think that's
Yeah.
a fine thing as well. So, there you have it as far as the MMA awards go. Kind of an odd mixed bag and a couple of sort of curveballs for us, not being as familiar with some of these outside organizations and people who are not within our purview. But obviously, we laid out why that is the case. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. 2024, good year for MMA, and those are the accolades that have been given out.
Hell
Anything
yeah.
else
I've
from you there,
I've
Chase?
listen, like I said before, and I'll say it again to end. We had a great year of fights. There's only better to come. And if you didn't have a really great year, you might have been missing out because this was chef's kiss. I loved it. 2024 will be remembered.
I agree entirely. And I also would like to, on that same note, extend a very big thank you to all of the supporters of this show. I mean, we've only been doing this for a handful of months at this point, but the support that we've already been receiving from you guys who have been hanging out with us in the chat and in the Discord has been a really great motivating factor to continue this. I love doing it. I think I can speak for Chase in saying that both of us do. We really appreciate that you guys seem to be enjoying it as well. So, 2024 is just the beginning of last week's fights. So keep on supporting what we are doing here on this show and on our individual channels. And Chase, I know that you can tell them where they can find you when it comes to that.
They will find me doing watch alongs anytime the UFC is ready to come back. I think it's January 11th, but that will be on youtube.com/@CP Smalls. And on Twitter, sometimes you'll find me hanging out at twitter.com/@CreativePartin, PARTIN.
Make sure you follow my boy. Of course, I am at Yama Show on all social media and, of course, as well on YouTube, youtube.com/@Yama Show. And if you are feeling like you want to support the show even that little bit extra, I don't know if you've been noticing if you're watching the video version of this podcast, but both myself and Chase are wearing the awesome Last Week's Fights shirts that the homie Chase is making in limited batches right now. If you are interested in getting this stylish design, these are early, first come, first serve products. You're going to be getting them before anybody else will be, before they're going to be mass produced. So if you are interested in rocking a shirt, hit up Chase at the socials that he just listed out, and he will get you hooked up with one of those. We will be back next Monday to give a preview. Next Monday will be a next week's fights. We'll be looking at the first fight of 2025. So that's going to be an exciting one as well. Hopefully some new content coming out from both of us. In the meantime, I know that myself, I'm going to be having a very, very long, very exhaustive video on the Conor McGregor civil trial. It's going to be a compilation of all of my live streams covering that event. That's going to be coming out either tonight or tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that on my channel at Yama Show. And as I said, we will be back with you very soon. So thanks again, everybody, for making 2024 not only a great year as far as MMA goes, but a great year as far as content creation goes for Chase and myself. Until next time, everybody, you have a great rest of your night, great rest of your week. We'll catch up with you soon. And as always, people, fight on.
Game.